Desperate to save her sick father, a poor girl sells her first night to a disabled man, until an unexpected CEO discovers the truth and falls in love with her. Rain pounded against the hospital windows as Lily Way stared at her father's medical chart, her hands trembling. The doctor's words, still, echoed in her mind. Without this surgery in the next 3 weeks, his heart will fail. The cost, $75,000, might as well have been $75 million. Her teacher's salary barely covered their modest apartment rent. Richard Way, once robust and full of life, lay asleep in the hospital bed, his skin now ashen against the sterile white sheets. Tubes snaked from his arms, monitoring a heart that betrayed him after 63 years of loyal service. The oxygen mask fogged rhythmically with each labored breath. Lily pressed her forehead against the cold window glass, watching raindrops race down the pane like the tears she refused to shed. At 23, she was supposed to be building her career, not watching her only remaining parent slip away. "There you are," came a familiar voice, smooth as silk but cold as ice. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Lily turned to face her Aunt Victoria Zhang, her mother's younger sister. Victoria's designer suit and perfectly manicured nails seemed obscenely out of place in the dreary hospital corridor. "How is he?" Victoria asked, though her eyes revealed more calculation than concern. "Dying," Lily replied flatly. "Unless we can somehow find $75,000 by the end of the month." Victoria's red lips curved into what might have been intended as a sympathetic smile. "That's precisely why I'm here, dear niece. I believe I have a solution to your financial predicament." She reached into her Prada handbag and extracted a pristine business card, its gold lettering catching the fluorescent hospital lights. "Exclusive companion services, discreet arrangements for discerning clients." "What is this?" Lily asked, though the sinking feeling in her stomach suggested she already knew. "My side business," Victoria replied casually, "for special clients with unique desires. One such client has expressed interest in—" She paused, examining her perfect manicure. "A companion with particular qualities. A young woman's first night. He's willing to pay generously." The words hit Lily like physical blows. "You want me to sell myself? That's prostitution." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "It's a gentleman's arrangement, Lily. Mr. Chen is visually impaired and extraordinarily wealthy. He's lonely and willing to pay $80,000 for the company of a young woman who hasn't been with anyone before. One night, that's all." "You can't be serious." "Your father will be dead in 3 weeks," Victoria cut in sharply. "Is your virtue worth more than his life?" Lily looked back at her father's sleeping form, the steady beep of the heart monitor marking the precious seconds of his remaining life. "Think about it," Victoria said, tucking the card into Lily's jacket pocket. "But don't think too long. Mr. Chen's offer expires tomorrow night." Later that evening, in their small 2-bedroom apartment, Lily sat at the kitchen table as her older brother Michael paced angrily. "We don't have a choice." Michael slammed his fist down, making the chipped mugs jump. "Dad raised us after Mom died. He worked 3 jobs to put me through college. And now you're too proud to make one sacrifice for him? It's not about pride," Lily whispered, twisting the frayed edge of the tablecloth. "It's about selling a part of myself I can never get back." "He's going to die, Lily." Michael's voice cracked. "What would you have us do? Watch him die knowing we could have saved him?" From the hallway came a painful groan. Richard Way had awakened and attempted to rise, only to collapse against the doorframe, clutching his chest. "Dad!" both siblings cried, rushing to his side. As they helped him back to bed, Richard's weathered hand gripped Lily's wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me," he gasped. "Promise you. Won't put yourselves in danger for my sake. I've lived my life." Tears finally spilled down Lily's cheeks as she watched her father struggle for breath. That night, after Michael had gone and her father finally slept, she called the number on the gold-embossed card. Victoria answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "I knew you'd make the right decision," she said. 3 days later, Lily found herself in Victoria's luxurious downtown office, signing a contract she could barely comprehend through her tears. The legal language disguised the ugly truth of what she was agreeing to. "Remember," Victoria instructed as she applied excessive makeup to Lily's tear-stained face, "Mr. Chen has been blind since birth. He's very insecure about his disability, so be gentle and accommodating. Convince him you're there because you want to be. I can't believe you're doing this to your own niece," Lily whispered, her voice hollow. Victoria's hand paused mid-application of lipstick. "Life isn't fair, dear. I learned that long ago. Your mother got the loving husband, the perfect family. I got the business acumen." She resumed applying the bright red color to Lily's trembling lips. "We all use what we have to survive in this world." As Lily signed the final page with a shaking hand, Victoria smiled with satisfaction. "The money will be transferred to the hospital tomorrow. Your father's surgery is already scheduled. Everyone gets what they need." "Not. Everything has a price," Lily said, standing to leave. Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Oh, my naive niece. I think you'll find that in this world, absolutely everything does." Outside, a sleek black limousine waited to take Lily to the Chen estate in the hills overlooking the city. As she settled into the leather seat, she caught her reflection in the tinted window. A stranger stared back with painted face and borrowed clothes, looking every bit the part of someone about to be sold to the highest bidder. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying Lily toward a night that would change her life forever, though not in any way she could possibly imagine. The limousine wound its way up the hills outside the city, each curve taking Lily further from everything familiar. Outside the window, mansions grew more imposing and more isolated, testaments to wealth that existed in a different universe from her own. The Chen estate appeared suddenly around a bend, a modernist structure of glass and stone perched on the hillside like an eagle's nest. Security gates parted silently as the limousine approached, closing behind them with a decisive clang that made Lily flinch. As the car crunched to a stop on the circular driveway, Lily took a deep breath, smoothing down the borrowed black dress that felt too tight, too revealing. Victoria's final words echoed in her mind. "Remember, $80,000 for one night. Keep him happy." The car door opened, and a silver-haired woman in a crisp uniform stood waiting, her posture rigid as a soldier's. "Ms. Wei, I presume. I am Mrs. Sullivan, head of Mr. Chen's household." Lily stepped out of the car, wobbling slightly on the unfamiliar high heels. "Yes, I'm Lily." Mrs. Sullivan's gaze traveled from Lily's excessive makeup to her uncomfortable shoes, making no effort to hide her disapproval. "Follow me, please." The interior of the mansion was minimalist and eerily silent, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. Artwork worth more than Lily would earn in a lifetime adorned the walls, yet the space felt sterile, unlived in. "Mr. Chen expects more than just physical presence," Mrs. Sullivan remarked as they walked. "He enjoys intelligent conversation. Can you discuss contemporary art? Classical music, perhaps?" I teach elementary school," Lily replied, feeling increasingly out of place. "But I read a lot." Mrs. Sullivan's lips thinned. "Indeed." She stopped before a large door. "Mr. Chen is waiting in the living room. Remember that while he cannot see you, he is exceptionally perceptive. Insincerity will not go unnoticed." With that warning, she opened the door and announced, "Ms. Wei has arrived, sir." The living room was dimly lit, with floor to ceiling, windows overlooking the glittering city below. Candles cast long shadows across expensive furniture. Near the window stood a man, his back to the door, silhouette sharp against the night sky. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. That will be all," he said, his voice unexpectedly youthful and smooth. When the door closed, Alexander Chen turned to face Lily. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps in his early 30s, with strong features and dark hair cut in an expensive style. His eyes, hidden behind dark glasses, gave away nothing of his thoughts. "Please sit." He gestured toward a sofa. His movements were careful but surprisingly confident for someone supposedly blind from birth. Would you like something to drink? Water? Wine? Water, please, Lily answered, her throat suddenly dry. Alexander moved to a side table with practiced ease, pouring water from a crystal decanter. He brought it to her without spilling a drop, locating her position with uncanny accuracy. You're nervous, he stated rather than asked, settling into an armchair across from her. You don't need to be. I don't bite. A small smile played at his lips. I'm sorry, Lily said automatically. This is all very new to me. Yes, that's rather the point, isn't it? Alexander replied, his tone impossible to read. Your first time sold to the highest bidder. You don't need to pretend interest in me, Lily. I know why you're here. Lily flinched at his bluntness. It's not what you think, isn't it? He interrupted. You need money desperately enough to sell the most intimate experience of your life to a stranger, a disabled stranger at that. Perhaps you thought it would be easier with someone who can't see your disgust? No, Lily protested. That's not. Then what is it? Alexander challenged. Why accept this arrangement if not for money? Lily's composure cracked. My father is dying. He needs heart surgery we can't afford. I'm not what your agency thinks I am. Something in Alexander's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I see. Or rather, I don't, he added with unexpected self-deprecation. We're more alike than you might think, Lily. People often see only what they expect to see. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Sullivan bringing dinner. As they moved to the dining table, Lily noticed something curious. Alexander navigated the room with a confidence that seemed at odds with complete blindness. He knew precisely where each piece of silverware was placed, reached for his wine glass without hesitation. During dinner, their conversation gradually became less strained. Alexander was well-read and articulate, asking thoughtful questions about Lily's teaching career and listening with genuine interest to her answers. Why elementary education? He asked as they finished the main course. I believe foundations matter, Lily replied, forgetting momentarily why she was there. Who you become starts with who helps shape your early years. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. And who helped shape yours? My father, she answered without hesitation. After my mother died, he became everything to me and my brother. He taught third grade for 40 years, inspiring me to become a teacher too. As she spoke about her father, Lily accidentally knocked over her wine glass. She gasped, reaching for her napkin, but Alexander's hand moved with startling speed, almost as if he had seen the glass falling. Lily froze, staring at him. Can you see me? Alexander went very still. The moment stretched between them, tense and uncertain. Suddenly, the dining room door swung open with force. A tall, imposing man in an impeccable suit stood in the doorway, his presence immediately commanding the room. Alex, we need to discuss the Harrison contract. The newcomer stopped abruptly, taking in the scene before him. His eyes, sharp and assessing, moved from Alexander to Lily and back again. I didn't realize you had company, he said, his voice cool and controlled. Alexander removed his dark glasses slowly, revealing perfectly normal eyes that fixed directly on the intruder. Jackson, your timing is impeccable as always. You can see, Lily whispered, rising from her chair in shock. The newcomer, Jackson, studied Lily with increasing interest. And who might you be? Jackson Lee, CEO of Han Enterprises. Alexander introduced reluctantly. This is Lily Wei. She's a guest. Jackson's eyebrow rose. Fractionally. A guest, I see. The way he said it made it clear he understood exactly what kind of guest she was. It's not what it looks like, Lily began, then stopped, realizing the absurdity of her protest. What could she possibly say to this stranger in his perfect suit who looked at her? Like she was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe? It rarely is, Jackson replied cryptically. His gaze was penetrating, as if he could see through her borrowed dress and makeup to the terrified teacher underneath. My apologies for the interruption, but instead of leaving, Jackson pulled out a chair and sat down at the table. Since I'm here, I might as well join you for dessert. He smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. I'm curious to hear more about Ms. Wei. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Alexander looked discomfited for the first time that evening, while Jackson emanated a calm authority that demanded answers. Lily sat back down slowly, feeling caught in a game whose rules she didn't understand, between two powerful men who clearly shared a complicated history. So, Ms. Wei, Jackson said, his voice deceptively casual as he signaled for Mrs. Sullivan to bring another place setting. What exactly brings you to my business partner's home this evening? Business partner? Lily looked between the two men, confusion evident on her face. I thought that I was just a wealthy blind man? Alexander interrupted, his discomfort obvious. The disability was exaggerated. Jackson's eyes narrowed. Exaggerated. Is that what we're calling fraud these days, Alex? It's not fraud, Alexander defended, though his voice lacked conviction. I have partial vision loss in my left eye. The agency simply embellished the condition. The agency, Jackson repeated coolly, turning his attention to Lily. That would be exclusive companion services, I presume? Victoria Zhang's little side business? Lily's stomach dropped. How do you know my aunt? A flicker of surprise crossed Jackson's face. Your aunt? Well, that adds an interesting dimension to this situation. He leaned back in his chair, studying Lily with renewed interest. Victoria Zhang has been trying to infiltrate Han Enterprises for years. Industrial espionage disguised as companion services to executives who might talk in their sleep. What are you implying? Alexander asked sharply. I'm not implying anything, Jackson replied. I'm stating facts. Your guest is the niece of a woman who has been attempting corporate sabotage against us for years. And you, my visually impaired friend, are either remarkably naive or complicit. The accusation hung in the air. Lily felt sick, trapped in a web of deception that seemed to grow more tangled by the second. I'm not a spy, she said quietly but firmly. I'm a third-grade teacher. My father needs heart surgery that costs $75,000. That's why I'm here. That's the only reason. As if on cue, her phone rang in her clutch purse. The hospital's number flashed on the screen. I need to take this, she said, her heart racing as she answered. Hello? The voice on the other end was urgent. Ms. Wei? This is Nurse Parker from Memorial. Your father has taken a turn for the worse. The doctor thinks we need to move up the surgery to tomorrow morning. We've had a cancellation and can fit him in, but we need confirmation that the payment will clear. Lily's hand trembled. The payment, yes, it should be processed tomorrow. We need confirmation tonight to schedule the OR team, the nurse insisted. I understand. I'll call you right back. Lily ended the call, fighting back tears as she looked at the two men watching her. My father's condition is deteriorating. They can do the surgery tomorrow, but they need payment confirmation tonight. Without hesitation, she turned to Alexander. Please, if you're going to help my father, I need to know now. Alexander shifted, uncomfortably glancing at Jackson. The arrangement was for after the full evening. The implication was clear, and Lily felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. To her surprise, Jackson pulled out his phone. What hospital? Memorial downtown, Lily answered automatically. But Jackson was already dialing. This is Jackson Lee, CEO of Han Enterprises. I need to speak with your financial department immediately regarding payment for Richard Wei's heart surgery. His tone brooked no argument. After a brief conversation and some efficient typing on his phone, he looked up. It's done. The hospital will receive the funds within the hour. Your father's surgery is scheduled for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Lily stared at him in disbelief. Why would you do that? Consider it a loan, Jackson replied evenly. We can discuss repayment terms once your father is stable. Tears of relief and confusion filled Lily's eyes. Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay you, but as I said, we'll discuss terms later, Jackson interrupted, standing abruptly. Alex, I believe our business here is concluded. Ms. Wei needs to get to the hospital. Alexander looked stunned by the turn of events. Jackson, this was my arrangement. An arrangement based on deception from all parties, Jackson cut him off coldly. My driver will take Ms. Wei to the hospital. You and I will discuss your involvement with Victoria Zhang's agency at a more appropriate time. Lily found herself being efficiently escorted from the dining room by Jackson, leaving a dumbfounded Alexander behind. In the grand foyer, Jackson handed Lily her coat. Ms. Wei, I suspect you are a victim in this scenario rather than a perpetrator. That said, I advise you to be more cautious about the company you keep, family included. Lily squared her shoulders, finding unexpected strength in the midst of this chaotic evening. Mr. Lee, I appreciate your help with my father's surgery more than I can express. But don't presume to know anything about me or the choices I've had to make. Not everyone has the luxury of better options. Something like respect flickered in Jackson's eyes. Fair enough. My driver will take you to Memorial. He handed her a business card. Call this number once your father is out of surgery. I meant what I said about discussing repayment terms. As Lily settled into the back of Jackson's luxurious car, her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Payment received. Surgery confirmed for 7 a.m. Dr. Reynolds will perform the procedure. Relief washed over her in a wave so powerful she had to bite her lip to keep from sobbing. Whatever happened next, whatever price she ultimately pay for tonight's events, her father would live. That was all that mattered. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Hospital, miss? Yes, please, Lily replied, wiping away a stray tear. She didn't notice that the car's intercom was on, transmitting her words to the hidden compartment in the back where Jackson Lee sat, listening intently. Will your father be okay? The driver asked kindly. I hope so, Lily answered. He's all I have left since my mother died. He's spent his whole life helping others, teaching children, working extra jobs to support us through college. He deserves better than this. Then what? The driver prompted gently. Lily stared out at the city lights blurring through her tears. Then having his daughter sell herself to save him. He raised me to believe in dignity and self-respect. If he ever found out what I agreed to do tonight. Her voice broke. In the concealed compartment, Jackson Lee sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable as he listened to Lily's raw confession. When the car finally stopped at the hospital entrance, he watched through tinted glass as she hurried inside, still wearing the borrowed dress and Victoria's excessive makeup, but somehow maintaining a dignity that transcended her circumstances. Where to now, sir? The driver asked through the intercom. Jackson considered for a moment. Han Tower, I have some research to do. By morning, Jackson Lee knew everything about Lily Wei, her academic achievements, her teaching record, her volunteer work at community centers. He knew about her father's 40 years of service in public education, her mother's death from cancer when Lily was 16, the second mortgage on their modest home to pay for her brother's college tuition. What had begun as a background check to ensure she wasn't part of Victoria Zhang's espionage had become something else entirely. A growing certainty that he had encountered someone extraordinary in the most unexpected circumstances. As dawn broke over the city, Jackson made two decisions. First, he would ensure Victoria Zhang never again used vulnerable women in her schemes. And second, he would offer Lily Wei a very different kind of arrangement, one that might benefit them both in ways neither could yet imagine. 2 weeks after Richard Wei's successful surgery, Lily sat nervously in the reception area of Han Tower, the gleaming headquarters of Han Enterprises. The marble and glass lobby soared 50 stories above her, a testament to power and wealth she could scarcely comprehend. She had received the call. Yesterday. An offer for a position as junior executive assistant at Han Enterprises. The salary mentioned was generous enough to make her wonder if there had been a mistake in the decimal point. When she asked why she was being considered, The human resources representative had simply said, "Mr. Lee personally requested your application." Now, dressed in her best and only interview suit, Lily clutched her resume folder as the sleek elevator carried her to the executive floor. She had spent hours researching the company, learning that Han Enterprises was one of the country's leading urban development firms, known for revitalizing historic districts while preserving their cultural heritage. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area where a poised woman with an elegant bob looked up from behind a curved desk. "Ms. Wei, Mr. Lee is expecting you. This way, please." Lily followed her down a corridor lined with contemporary art, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did Jackson Lee want from her? Was this about repaying her father's medical bills? The assistant stopped before a set of imposing double doors. "You may go in." Jackson Lee's office was a minimalist space of clean lines and muted colors. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, including, Lily noted with a pang, the hospital where her father had been treated. Jackson stood with his back to the door, apparently absorbed in the view. "Mr. Lee?" Lily said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you for seeing me." Jackson turned, his expression inscrutable as ever. Today he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual teaching salary. "Ms. Wei, please, sit." Lily perched on the edge of an uncomfortable-looking chair, placing her resume on his desk. "I brought my credentials, though I'm not entirely sure why I'm here." Jackson didn't even glance at the folder. "Your qualifications are not in question. I've already reviewed your background extensively." "You investigated me?" Lily asked, unsure whether to be offended or impressed. "Due diligence," Jackson replied unapologetically. "Standard procedure when someone connected to Victoria Zhang enters my orbit." Lily stiffened. "I'm nothing like my aunt." "No," Jackson agreed, surprising her. "You're not, which is precisely why you're here." He sat down behind his desk, folding his hands. "I'm offering you a position as junior executive assistant, focusing initially on our historic district revitalization project. The starting salary is $85,000 annually, with benefits and performance bonuses." Lily blinked. That was more than double her teaching salary. "Why would you offer me such a position? I have no corporate experience." "Consider it an investment," Jackson said, finally picking up her resume and scanning it with apparent interest. "You have a master's degree in education with a focus on community development. You're clearly intelligent, resourceful, and demonstrate extraordinary loyalty to family. These are qualities I value. If this is about repaying my father's medical bills—" "It's not charity," Jackson interrupted, looking up from the resume. "It's a legitimate job offer. The repayment plan for your father's surgery will be deducted in manageable installments from your salary. Everything above board, everything documented." Lily studied him, trying to discern his true motives. "And if I decline? Then we establish a different repayment plan based on your teacher's salary." Jackson answered smoothly. "This offer isn't conditional on the debt. It's separate." "Why me?" Lily pressed. "There must be hundreds of qualified applicants with actual business experience." Jackson's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes shifted. "Perhaps I recognize someone who will go to extraordinary lengths to protect what matters to them. That's a rare quality, Ms. Wei. One worth investing in." 2 days later, having accepted the position after considerable deliberation, Lily found herself being oriented to the executive floor by Sophia Wang, Jackson's senior assistant. Sophia was impeccably dressed, with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Mr. Lee rarely explains his decisions," Sophia remarked as she showed Lily her new workstation. "Your sudden appearance is unusual, particularly given your lack of qualifications." "I have a master's degree," Lily replied evenly. "In education," Sophia scoffed. "Not business, not finance, not anything relevant to what we do here." Over the next few weeks, Lily discovered just how unwelcome she was in this rarefied environment. Documents she needed mysteriously disappeared. Meeting notifications arrived after the meetings had already started. Colleagues spoke in business jargon she didn't understand, then exchanged smirks when she asked for clarification. The worst came during her first executive team meeting. Sophia had forgotten to give Lily the briefing materials, leaving her unprepared as Jackson called on her for input about the historic district project. "Ms. Wei, your thoughts on the community impact assessment?" Jackson asked, his expression giving away nothing. The room fell silent, a dozen executives watching expectantly. Sophia's smug smile from across the table made it clear this was a deliberate setup. Lily took a deep breath. She hadn't received the official assessment, but she had spent her evenings researching the district independently, even visiting the neighborhood on her lunch breaks. "While I haven't seen the official assessment," she began honestly, "my own research suggests the current plan underestimates the impact on small businesses. The district has 27 family-owned establishments that have operated for over 30 years, many serving immigrant communities with specific cultural needs. Standard relocation packages won't adequately address their specialized requirements." The room remained silent but silent. Now with a different quality, surprise rather than anticipation. Lily continued, warming to her subject. "These businesses aren't just commercial entities. They're community anchors. For example, Mrs. Chen's bakery isn't valuable because of its revenue, but because it's where 3 generations gather. On Sunday mornings, Mr. Patel's hardware store doubles as an informal job placement service for new immigrants. These functions won't appear on any financial statement, but they're vital infrastructure, nonetheless." When she finished, Lily looked up to find Jackson watching her with an expression she couldn't quite identify. Assessment, perhaps, or something close to approval. "Ms. Wei raises excellent points," he said finally. "Sophia, please ensure Ms. Wei receives all briefing materials going forward. She clearly makes good use of them." That afternoon, Jackson called Lily into his office. She entered warily, expecting reprimand for her candor. Instead, he said, "Effective immediately, you'll lead the community engagement team for the historic district project. Sophia will brief you on the details." Lily stared at him in shock. "But I've only been here 3 weeks." And demonstrated more insight into community impact than team members who've been here 3 years, Jackson replied matter-of-factly. "Results matter more than tenure at Han Enterprises." Later, as Lily gathered her things to leave for the day, Sophia approached her desk, face tight with barely controlled anger. "I don't know what game you're playing or how you've enchanted Jackson Lee, but let me be clear. No one rises this quickly without special methods of persuasion. We all know how you really got this job." The implication stung, but Lily refused to show it. "Judge me by my work, Sophia, nothing else. We'll see how long his fascination with you lasts," Sophia replied coldly. "Jackson Lee isn't known for his warm heart or long attention span. They call him the Ice Emperor for a reason." Over the following months, Lily discovered the truth in that nickname. Jackson Lee was brilliant, demanding, and utterly unsentimental in business matters. He expected excellence and showed little patience for anything less. Yet occasionally she glimpsed something else, like when he quietly arranged for an elderly employee's medical leave to be extended at full pay, or how he remembered the names of every maintenance worker in the building. One evening, working late, Lily delivered some files to Jackson's office and found him standing at the window, silhouetted against the city lights. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said without turning. "All those lights. All those lives." "Yes," Lily agreed, setting the files on his desk. "Though sometimes I wonder if we see the same thing when we look out there." Jackson finally turned. "What do you see, Lily?" It was the first time he'd used her first name, and it caught her off guard. "I see neighborhoods, communities, places where people build lives together." "And what do you think I see?" "Assets, opportunities, development potential," she answered honestly. To her surprise, Jackson smiled slightly. Not entirely wrong, but incomplete. He moved to stand beside her at the window. "I see systems that can be improved, inefficiencies that cause unnecessary suffering, Potential not just for profit but for transformation. They stood in silence for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the glittering cityscape. "Why did you really help me that night?" Lily finally asked, the question that had haunted her for months. "With my father?" Jackson considered her question, his profile sharp against the night sky. "Perhaps I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself. A willingness to sacrifice for family, an unwillingness to be defined by circumstances." Before Lily could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Mother. Jackson's expression immediately closed. "I need to take this," he said, his tone once again professional and distant. "Good night, Ms. Wei." As Lily turned to leave, she noticed a silver-framed photograph on his desk she hadn't seen before. An elegant older woman standing between Jackson and a beautiful young woman in formal attire. "My mother," Jackson explained, following her gaze. "And Diana Chen." "Your wife?" Lily asked, feeling an unexpected twist in her stomach. "Ex-fiancé," Jackson corrected. "The engagement ended last year." The phone continued ringing insistently. As Lily left the office, she heard Jackson answer, his voice immediately tense. "Yes, Mother, I understand your concerns, but—" Walking to the elevator, Lily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know how you really got your position at Han Enterprises. Does your father know what you were willing to do for his surgery?" Lily stared at the message, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Someone knew about that night at Alexander Chen's house and was prepared to use it against her. The Historic District Revitalization Project quickly became Lily's entire world. As team leader for community engagement, she spent her days meeting with local business owners, residents, and community leaders, and her evenings compiling reports and developing strategies to address their concerns. The district itself was a vibrant patchwork of cultures, a 6-block area where Chinese herbalists operated next to Italian delis, where Dominican beauty salons shared walls with Ukrainian bakeries. Buildings dating back to the 1890s housed businesses that had been in the same family for generations. Most development companies would have simply bulldozed the area and started fresh. Han Enterprises, under Jackson's direction, aimed for something more nuanced, preserving the district's character while making it economically sustainable. One rainy Tuesday, Lily sat in Mrs. Gonzalez's tiny restaurant, explaining the preliminary plans over homemade empanadas. "So you promise we won't be forced out?" the elderly woman asked skeptically. "The last developers offered money, but where would I go? My family has cooked here for 40 years. Our goal is to keep businesses like yours in place," Lily assured her. "We'll renovate the building to meet code, but your lease will be protected with controlled rent increases." Mrs. Gonzalez nodded slowly. "You're different from the others who've come with their fancy plans. You actually listen." "That's her job," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Lily turned to see Jackson Lee standing there, raindrops glistening on his overcoat. His unexpected appearance in this humble restaurant seemed to shrink the space. "Mr. Lee," Lily said, rising quickly, "I didn't know you were visiting the district today." "Impromptu decision," he replied, then turned to Mrs. Gonzalez with a surprising smile. "Your empanadas come highly recommended. My grandfather used to say you can judge a neighborhood by its food traditions." Mrs. Gonzalez blushed with pleasure, bustling to bring Jackson a plate. Sit, any friend of Ms. Wei is welcome. Here." As they shared the simple meal, Lily watched in amazement as Jackson, the intimidating Ice Emperor, chatted easily with the restaurant owner about her family recipes and the history of the building. He seemed genuinely interested, asking insightful questions about how her business had evolved over decades. When they finally left, walking together under Jackson's large umbrella, Lily couldn't contain her curiosity. "You're different outside the office," she observed. "Am I?" he asked, navigating them around a puddle. "The executives at Han Tower would be shocked to see you eating empanadas in a tiny restaurant with mismatched chairs." Jackson's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "Perhaps that's why I keep certain aspects of myself private. Perception is a powerful tool in business." As they rounded a corner, Jackson stopped abruptly, staring at a storefront. Across the street, a group of men in expensive suits were examining the building, one taking photographs of the facade. "Who are they?" Lily asked, noting Jackson's suddenly tense posture. "Representatives of Phoenix Development," he replied grimly. "They've been quietly acquiring properties in this district, allegedly for historic preservation, though their track record suggests otherwise." Back at Han Tower that afternoon, Lily found her team gathered around Sophia Wang, who was distributing glossy presentation folders. "What's going on?" Lily asked. Sophia smiled thinly. "Mr. Lee asked me to prepare updated financial projections for tomorrow's executive presentation. Since you were out socializing, I took the initiative. These are my team's figures," Lily said, flipping through the folder. "But they've been altered. The community impact metrics are completely missing." "Streamlined," Sophia corrected. "The board cares about ROI, not heartwarming stories about family restaurants." That evening, Lily stayed late, meticulously restoring the original data and preparing her own presentation that balanced financial returns with community preservation metrics. Around midnight, exhausted but satisfied, she gathered her materials to leave. As she waited for the elevator, she heard voices from Jackson's office, one his, the other female, and vaguely familiar. "The Phoenix Group's offer is substantial," the woman was saying. "They're willing to partner with Hani Enterprises for the entire eastern section." "We don't need partners," came Jackson's curt reply. "This isn't just business, Jackson. It's family." Lily froze as the woman emerged from the office. Diana Chen, Jackson's ex-fiancée, even more stunning in person than in the photograph. Diana paused when she saw Lily. "Working late?" she asked pleasantly, though her eyes were assessing. "You must be the new community specialist. Jackson mentioned you." "Lily Wei." Lily introduced herself, uncomfortably aware of her rumpled blouse and messy hair after the long day. "Diana Chen," the woman replied. "I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. The Chen family has significant interests in the historic district." The elevator arrived and Diana stepped inside. "Oh, and Lily? Don't let Sophia intimidate you. She's been trying to climb the corporate ladder for years, by any means necessary." And the next morning, Lily arrived early to find her computer logged in, files open. Someone had accessed her work overnight. Checking quickly, she found subtle changes to her presentation, altered figures that would undermine her points about community preservation. With only minutes before the board meeting, Lily grabbed her backup flash drive and hurried to the conference room, where executives were already assembling. Sophia watched with narrowed eyes as Lily connected her drive to the presentation system. "Technical issues with the shared folder," Lily explained smoothly. "Fortunately, I have a backup." When Jackson entered, the room fell silent. He nodded for Lily to begin. Taking a deep breath, she launched into her presentation, emphasizing how preserving the district's character would actually enhance its long-term value. She was just reaching her conclusion when Sophia interrupted. "Excuse me, but these figures contradict the official projections. Perhaps Ms. Wei is prioritizing her personal connections in the district over company interests." Before Lily could respond, Jackson spoke. "The figures appear accurate to me. Continue, Ms. Wei." "There's one more thing," Lily said, her heart racing. "During my research, I discovered that an entity called Phoenix Development has been systematically purchasing key properties throughout the district. Further investigation reveals Phoenix is actually a subsidiary of Chen Global Investments." The room went completely still. Jackson's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "I believe their intention is to control enough properties to either force a partnership with Han Enterprises or compete directly against our redevelopment plans," Lily concluded. "That's a serious accusation," one of the board members commented. "It's documented fact," Lily replied, displaying property records on the screen. "Phoenix has acquired 7 strategic properties in the last 6 months, creating a pattern of ownership that effectively divides the district." After the meeting, as Executives filed out with murmured conversations. Jackson asked Lily to remain behind. "That was comprehensive," he said when they were alone. "I hope I didn't overstep," Lily replied. "You identified a significant competitive threat that my own analysts missed," Jackson said. "That's not overstepping, it's excellence." Pride warmed her chest at his rare praise. "However," he continued, his tone cooling, "information about Chen Global's involvement should have been brought to me privately first. The Chen family has complicated connections to Han Enterprises." Diana Chen mentioned family interests. Lily acknowledged. "Are they why your engagement ended?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Jackson's expression hardened instantly. "My personal history is not relevant to this project, Ms. Wei. Please focus on your actual responsibilities." "Properly." Chastised, Lily nodded and gathered her materials to leave. At the door, Jackson's voice stopped her. "Lily." She turned, surprised by his use of her first name again. "Be careful. The Chens are not people to cross lightly." That evening, returning to her modest apartment where her father was recovering, Lily found a thick manila envelope had been slipped under her door. Inside was a copy of the contract she had signed with Victoria's agency, along with photographs taken of her entering Alexander Chen's home that night. A note was paper-clipped to the documents. "A promising career can be destroyed so easily. Reconsider your position on the historic district project." Lily stared at the evidence of the worst night of her life, her hands trembling. Someone, likely connected to Phoenix Development, was now using that night as leverage against her. But they had miscalculated badly if they thought she would be easily intimidated. She was no longer the desperate woman who had signed that contract. Working at Han Enterprises, finding her voice and purpose with the historic district project had changed her. Jackson Lee might be a demanding and sometimes cold employer, but he had given her an opportunity to prove her worth based on merit, not circumstance. Lily carefully placed the documents in her fireproof safe, then called the one person who might understand what she was facing. "Mr. Lee, I think we have a problem." 30 minutes after her call, Jackson's sleek black car pulled up outside Lily's apartment building. She watched from her window as he stepped out, his tall figure cutting a sharp silhouette against the streetlights. Even at this late hour, his suit was immaculate, his posture perfect, a man who lived in perpetual readiness. Lily buzzed him in, smoothing her hair nervously. Her small apartment, with its second-hand furniture and family photos, suddenly seemed painfully modest. Her father had gone to bed hours ago, his recovery still requiring substantial rest. When she opened the door, Jackson's gaze swept the apartment in one quick assessment, revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Thank you for coming," Lily said, leading him to the dining table where she had laid out the threatening documents. Jackson examined the contents of the envelope in silence, his expression darkening as he studied the photographs and contract. "This was delivered tonight?" he asked finally. "Yes. No courier, just pushed under my door." "Amateur intimidation," Jackson commented, though his tone suggested he took the threat seriously. "Professionals would be more subtle." "Does that mean you know who sent it?" Jackson's mouth tightened. "I have suspicions." He looked up at her. "Why call me? You could have taken this to the police." Lily met his gaze steadily. "The police would ask questions I don't want to answer publicly. Besides, this isn't just about me. It's about the project. Someone doesn't want me revealing the Phoenix Development connection." Jackson nodded slightly, as if she'd passed some unspoken test. Wise assessment. An unplanned yawn escaped her, reminding them both of the late hour. "I apologize," she said, embarrassed. "It's been a long day." "No apology needed." Gathered the documents, sliding them back into the envelope. "I'll have our security team analyze these. In the meantime, don't engage with any unknown contacts and report anything suspicious immediately." He hesitated, then added, "It might be prudent for you to stay elsewhere for a few nights. I can't leave my father, Lily protested. He's still recovering. Jackson considered this. Then I'll arrange security for this building. As he turned to leave, Lily caught his arm impulsively. Wait, you still haven't told me who you think is behind this. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unguarded flickered in Jackson's expression. Diana's cousin, Alexander Chen, the man whose house you were brought to that night. But why would he target me now? Because you've become a threat to their plans for the district. Jackson's voice was grim, and because the Chens never forget what they consider debts or slights. The next morning, Lily noticed an unmarked car parked outside her building, a serious-faced man in the driver's seat nodding respectfully as she left for work. Han Enterprises security, she realized, keeping Jackson's promise. At the office, a beautiful, floral arrangement sat on her desk, exotic blooms in crimson and gold. The card read simply, "Looking forward to working together on the historic district. Diana Chen." The message was clear in its veiled threat. Diana knew where Lily worked and wanted her to know it. Sophia Wang paused by Lily's desk, eyeing the arrangement. "Interesting friends you're making." "Not friends," Lily replied evenly. "Business contacts." Sophia laughed, the sound brittle. "The Chens don't have business contacts. They have assets and obstacles. I'd be careful which category you fall into." Later that day, Lily was summoned to Jackson's office, where she found him conversing with an elegant older woman. The family resemblance was unmistakable, the same commanding presence, the same assessing gaze. "Lily, this is my mother, Elizabeth Lee," Jackson introduced them. "Mother, this is Lily Wei, who leads our community engagement for the Historic District Project." Elizabeth Lee extended a perfectly manicured hand. "So you're the young woman Jackson has mentioned. Fascinating background, from elementary school teacher to corporate strategist in such a short time." The emphasis she placed on fascinating made Lily wonder exactly what Jackson had shared about her history. "Your son gave me an opportunity to apply my community development training in a different context," Lily replied carefully. Elizabeth smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed. Jackson has always had an unconventional approach to staffing." She turned to her son. "Speaking of unconventional, Diana mentioned your reluctance to consider Phoenix's partnership proposal. I hope you're not letting personal history cloud your business judgment. Phoenix's proposal doesn't align with our vision for the district," Jackson replied, his tone professionally neutral but with an undercurrent of tension. "Vision doesn't pay dividends, darling." Elizabeth sighed dramatically. "The Chen family has been connected to ours for 3 generations. Your father would have wanted—" "My father would have prioritized the integrity of his projects," Jackson interrupted firmly. "As I do." Elizabeth's smile tightened. "We'll discuss this further at dinner tonight." She turned back to Lily. "It was illuminating to meet you, Ms. Wei. I do hope you find your role here sustainable." After she left, Jackson stared out the window, his posture rigid. "Your mother seems concerned about your refusal to partner with Phoenix," Lily ventured. "My mother is concerned with appearances and family alliances," Jackson replied without turning. "The Chens have been business partners with the Lee since my grandfather's time. My broken engagement to Diana complicated matters. May I ask what happened between you and Diana?" Jackson finally turned, his expression carefully composed. "We wanted different things. Diana saw our marriage as a merger of family interests. He paused, something vulnerable briefly crossing his face. "I foolishly hoped for something more." The admission, so personal from a man who rarely revealed anything of himself, caught Lily by surprise. Before she could respond, his phone rang. Checking the caller ID, his expression darkened. "Alexander Chen," he said, answering on speaker. "This is unexpected." "Jackson, old friend." Alexander's voice was smooth as silk. "I heard your community specialist received my message. Consider it a professional courtesy, a reminder that some arrangements are best kept private." If you threaten my employees again, courtesy will be the last word I'd use to describe my response, Jackson replied, his voice cold. Alexander laughed. Such dramatics. I'm simply suggesting Ms. Wei might be happier returning to her former career. Teaching children seems much more appropriate for her talents. Lily's cheeks burned at the insinuation, but Jackson's expression remained glacial. Ms. Wei's talents are being put to excellent use exactly where she is, he stated. Now, if you have a legitimate business matter to discuss, I suggest you go through proper channels. Always so proper, Alexander mused. I wonder, does Ms. Wei know about your own arrangement with her? How you've been watching her since that night at my house? The extensive background checks? The surveillance? Lily stared at Jackson, who avoided her gaze. I protect my investments, Jackson replied evenly. As you well know. Indeed, well, I'll leave you to explain that to her. Oh, and Jackson? Diana sends her regards. She's looking forward to seeing you both at the Chamber of Commerce Gala tomorrow night. After Alexander hung up, silence stretched between them. You've been watching me? Lily finally asked, her voice tight. Not in the way he implied, Jackson answered. Standard security protocols for executives working on sensitive projects. Is that all I am? A sensitive project? Something flickered in Jackson's eyes. Frustration? Regret? You're an exceptional employee who's being targeted because of your effectiveness. The security measures are for your protection. And the background checks? The surveillance he mentioned? Jackson hesitated, then sighed. After that night at Chen's house, I needed to know if you were connected to Victoria Zhang's corporate espionage. The initial investigation cleared you completely. After that, he trailed off. After that what? Lily pressed. After that I was, curious, he admitted. Your resilience, your dedication to your father, your refusal to be defined by circumstances, they were remarkable. When I researched your background, I found someone whose potential was being wasted teaching multiplication tables. Teaching children is not wasting potential, Lily replied sharply. Poor choice of words, Jackson conceded. What I meant was that your abilities could have broader impact, which you've proven conclusively with the Historic District project. Lily wanted to stay angry, but the sincerity in his voice made it difficult. You should have told me. Yes, he agreed simply. I should have. The next evening, the Chamber of Commerce Gala transformed the city's historic art museum into a glittering showcase of power and wealth. Lily arrived wearing the most formal dress she owned, a modest navy blue cocktail dress purchased years ago for a cousin's wedding. She felt instantly underdressed among the designer gowns and bespoke suits. As leader of the community engagement team, her presence was required, but she planned to stay just long enough to be seen and then slip away. You came. Jackson's voice startled her as she hovered near a display of architectural renderings for the historic district. He looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, drawing admiring glances from women throughout the room. I'm representing the project, she replied formally, still unsettled from their conversation the day before. Of course. He offered her a champagne flute, though I hoped you might also want to hear my speech. I'm announcing some changes to the project that I think will interest you. Before she could ask what changes, a familiar voice interrupted them. Jackson, there you are. Diana Chen approached, resplendent in a red gown that hugged her perfect figure, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. She air-kissed Jackson's cheek, then turned to Lily with a practiced smile. Ms. Wei, how lovely to see you again. I trust you received my flowers? They were beautiful, Lily replied neutrally. Thank you. Diana, Jackson acknowledged coolly. I wasn't aware you'd be attending tonight. The historic district is of great interest to Chen Global, she replied, particularly since we now own nearly 30% of the properties through Phoenix Development. Jackson's expression didn't change, but Lily sensed his tension. Congratulations on your acquisitions, though I'm curious why you didn't approach Han Enterprises directly. Diana laughed lightly. Sometimes indirect routes yield better results. Speaking of results, I'd love your thoughts on the latest proposals. Perhaps we could discuss them privately. The suggestive tone made her meaning clear. Lily awkwardly began to excuse herself, but Jackson placed a hand lightly at the small of her back. Ms. Wei is integral to the project discussions, he said firmly. Any proposal should include her input. Diana's smile cooled several degrees. How democratic of you, Jackson, though I wonder if Ms. Wei's unique background is relevant to high-level negotiations. The deliberate emphasis made Lily stiffen. Diana knew about that night with Alexander and was willing to weaponize the knowledge. Ms. Wei's background in community development is precisely why her input is valuable, Jackson replied smoothly. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to review my speech with her before the presentations begin. As they walked away, Diana called after them. Do give my regards to your father, Ms. Wei. I hear his recovery is progressing well. It would be tragic if he suffered any setbacks. Lily stopped cold, turning back with barely controlled fury. Are you threatening my father? Diana's expression was all innocent surprise. Threatening? Merely expressing? Concern for a man who's been through so much. Medical recovery can be so unpredictable, can't it? Before Lily could respond, Jackson gently but firmly guided her away. She's baiting you, he murmured. Don't give her the satisfaction. She just threatened my father, Lily whispered fiercely. No, and we'll address it. But not here, not now. In a quiet alcove away from the crowd, Lily struggled to compose herself. How does she know about my father's condition? About that night with Alexander? What else do they know about me? Jackson's face was grim. The Chens have their own intelligence networks. They've clearly been investigating you since you identified the Phoenix development connection. Why are they so focused on me? I'm just one employee. Because you've become a symbol, Jackson replied, of my commitment to the historic district project as I envision it, not as they want it. And perhaps, he hesitated, because they suspect you might mean something to me personally. Lily looked up, startled by the implication. Do I? Before Jackson could answer, his mother appeared, elegant in midnight blue silk. There you are, darling. They're ready for your speech. Elizabeth's gaze slid to Lily, noting their proximity with obvious disapproval. Ms. Wei, I believe you're seated at table. Ms. Wei, the voice on the phone was smooth, professional. Mr. Chen mentioned you might reach out. I'm Thomas Grant, special consultant to Phoenix Development. I want guarantees before I share anything, Lily said firmly. My brother's debt's cleared. Written confirmation that the contract with ADA, Victoria Zhang's agency, is nullified, and assurance that my father will be safe. Direct and pragmatic, Thomas commented, sounding impressed. Mr. Chen appreciates those qualities. Perhaps we should meet in person to discuss specifics. 2 hours later, Lily sat in a private booth at an upscale restaurant downtown, across from a distinguished man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes. Thomas Grant had the polished manner of someone accustomed to delicate negotiations. Your terms are reasonable, he said after they'd ordered coffee. Alexander has authorized me to address all three concerns. Your brother's debts, which, by the way, are considerably larger than you realize, can be resolved today. The contract with Ms. Zhang's agency will be nullified immediately. As for your father's safety, I assure you neither Phoenix nor the Chen family would ever harm an innocent man. I need more than verbal assurances, Lily insisted. Thomas smiled approvingly. Of course. He slid a folder across the table. Documentation of your brother's debts, with receipts showing payment in full. A signed statement from Victoria Zhang, relinquishing all claims against you. And a formal letter from Chen Global Investment stipulating protection for Richard Wei as part of our arrangement. Lily reviewed the documents carefully. They appeared legitimate, though she noted they were dated tomorrow, clearly prepared in anticipation of her agreement. What exactly does Phoenix want? In return? She asked, closing the folder. Initially, just information, Thomas explained. Jackson Lee's true intentions for specific properties, which landowners he's approaching directly, the financial parameters he's working within. Corporate espionage, Lily translated flatly. Thomas smiled. Thinly. Business intelligence, no different than what Han Enterprises gathers on its competitors. And later, after the initial phase, his expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. Eventually, we would need you to influence certain decisions. Recommend partnership with Phoenix for key properties. Identify vulnerabilities in Han's approach that we could address in joint proposals. Lily took a deep breath. I need time to consider this. Of course, Thomas agreed smoothly. Though I should mention that Diana Chen is hosting a private dinner tonight at her penthouse. The guest list includes several Han Enterprises board members who will be shown certain documents similar to those you received previously. The timing of that presentation depends entirely on our conversation here. The threat was clear. Agree now or face exposure tonight. Lily met his gaze steadily. I'll give you my answer at 5 o'clock, not a minute before. Thomas checked his watch. That gives you 3 hours. Very well. As she left the restaurant, Lily's mind raced. She couldn't betray Jackson, not after everything he'd done for her. But neither could she risk her family's safety. There had to be another way. Back at her apartment, she found her father napping peacefully, unaware of the dangers swirling around him. She quietly gathered the original threatening documents she'd received, adding the folder from Thomas. Whatever she decided, she needed evidence of the Chen family's manipulation. At precisely 4:30, Lily made 2 calls. The first to her brother Michael, instructing him to take their father to a hotel immediately and wait for her there. The second to a number she had memorized but never used, Jackson Lee's private line. When he answered, she spoke quickly. I need to see you urgently, not at the office. It's about Diana Chen and Phoenix. There was a brief pause. My penthouse, 30 minutes. Jackson's penthouse occupied the top floor of a sleek building overlooking the river. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city he was helping to reshape. The space was minimalist but not cold. Leather and wood softened the modern lines, and to Lily's surprise, shelves held actual books rather than decorative objects. This isn't what I expected, she admitted, as Jackson led her into the living area. What did you expect? He asked, offering her a seat. Something more impersonal, like your office. A slight smile crossed his face. My office is designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. This is where I actually live. Lily noticed subtle personal touches she would never have associated with. The formidable CEO, a well-worn paperback on the coffee table, a colorful handmade quilt draped over a chair, even a few family photographs. Jackson noted her surprise. You thought I slept suspended upside down like a bat, didn't you? The unexpected humor broke the tension. Lily laughed despite herself. Something like that. His expression sobered quickly. You said this was urgent. Lily placed both folders on the coffee table. The Chens have been blackmailing me, first with threats, now with offers. As Jackson examined the documents, his face hardened. When did this happen? Diana confronted me at the gala last night. Alexander approached me afterward. Today I met with their representative. She took a deep breath. They want me to spy on you, Jackson, to feed them information about the historic district project. And in exchange, they'd protect your family and eliminate the evidence of your arrangement with Victoria Zhang, he concluded, his voice carefully neutral. Yes? Lily watched his face anxiously. I didn't agree to anything. I wouldn't. Jackson was silent for a long moment, studying the documents. Why come to me? You could have accepted their offer, gathered your family and disappeared. Because that would mean they win, Lily said simply. And because... She hesitated, then continued more softly. Because I couldn't betray you. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. Even though I kept things from you? The surveillance, the background checks? You gave me a chance when no one else would, Lily replied. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Whatever your initial motivations, you treated me with respect. Jackson rose and moved to the window, his back to her as he gazed out at the city. The Chens aren't just threatening you, Lily. They're declaring war on Han Enterprises through you. They want the historic district redeveloped their way. Luxury condominiums, high-end retail, all the traditional profit centers. And you want something different, Lily said. I want something better, he corrected, turning back to face her. A model for urban renewal that respects history and community while still being economically viable. The historic district could set a precedent for development projects nationwide. Lily suddenly understood. That's why you hired me. Not just because of what happened that night, but because of my background in community development. Your compassion is matched by your intelligence, Jackson acknowledged. You see value where others see only balance sheets. His phone rang, interrupting the moment. Checking the caller ID, he frowned. It's my mother. Excuse me. I need to take this. As Jackson stepped into another room, Lily explored the penthouse, curious about the private life of the enigmatic CEO. In what appeared to be a home office, she noticed architectural models of the historic district, different versions, showing various development approaches. One model particularly caught her eye. It preserved all the existing buildings but added community gardens, affordable housing, and small business incubator spaces. It was labeled simply, Way Proposal, Option A. That's based on your community engagement. Report, Jackson said from the doorway, watching her. Your insights shaped the entire final approach. Lily stared at the model, touched that her work had made such an impact. Your mother? Diana's dinner party has already begun, he replied grimly. My mother called to warn me that there will be revelations tonight about a certain Han Enterprises executive. Me, Lily said flatly. They're going to expose my past to the board. They're going to try. Jackson's expression was determined, but we're not going to let them. What can we do? They have the contract, the photo. We can beat them at their own game. Jackson's eyes held a steely resolve she'd seen before in business negotiations. But I need to know if you trust me, Lily. Completely. She didn't hesitate. I do. Then call Thomas Grant. Tell him you've made your decision. You'll work with Phoenix. Lily stared at him in confusion. You want me to accept their offer to spy for them? I want you to appear to accept, Jackson clarified, while actually feeding them exactly what we want them to know. A double agent, Lily realized. Precisely. Meanwhile, I'll deal with Diana's dinner party. He checked his watch. We don't have much time. Across town in Diana Chen's luxurious penthouse, a select group had gathered for what she had billed as a strategy dinner. 4 Han Enterprises board members, including Jackson's mother Elizabeth, sat around the elegantly set dining table, along with Alexander Chen and Sophia Wang. I appreciate you all coming on such short notice, Diana said, raising her wine glass, especially when the matter at hand is so delicate. You mentioned concerns about the historic district project, one of the board members prompted. Something about personnel issues? Diana smiled graciously. Indeed. While Jackson's vision for the district is admirable, some of his staffing choices raise serious questions about his judgment. She nodded to Sophia, who distributed folders to each guest. These documents concern Lily Way, the woman Jackson has inexplicably placed in charge of community engagement. Elizabeth Lee opened her folder, her perfectly composed face showing a flicker of shock as she examined the contents. As you can see, Diana continued, Ms. Way's qualifications for her position are unconventional. Before joining Han Enterprises, she was employed through my cousin Alexander's connections with a certain type of agency. This is outrageous, a board member muttered, staring at the contract. Indeed it is, came a voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Jackson Lee standing there, immaculate in a tailored suit, his expression calm, but his eyes dangerously cold. Though not for the reasons you might think. Diana recovered quickly from her surprise. "Jackson, this is unexpected." "Is it?" He entered the room with measured steps. "I thought ambushes were generally expected to be surprising." Elizabeth rose, clearly flustered. "Jackson, these documents are part of an elaborate scheme to undermine Han Enterprises' historic district project," he finished for her, placing his own folder on the table. "A scheme orchestrated by Phoenix Development and Chen Global Investments." He turned to address the board members directly. "What Diana has conveniently omitted is that Victoria Zhang's agency is a front for corporate espionage, targeting executives through compromising situations. Ms. Wei was not a willing participant but a victim. Her father was critically ill, needing expensive surgery that was mysteriously denied coverage by his insurance." Jackson opened his folder, removing several documents. "Insurance that, as it happens, is provided by a subsidiary of Chen Global Investments. The denial of coverage was deliberate, creating the financial desperation that Victoria Zhang then exploited." "Alexander." Chen's face darkened. "These are serious allegations, Jackson." "They're documented facts, Alexander." Jackson distributed his own materials to the stunned board members. Bank transfers from Chen Global to Victoria Zhang's agency. Communications between Diana and Victoria discussing the Wei situation. And most damning of all, internal Phoenix Development memos outlining their plan to sabotage Han's historic district project by compromising key team members. Diana's composure cracked slightly. "This is absurd. You can't possibly have—" "Oh, but I do." Jackson interrupted smoothly. "Phoenix has been sloppy, overconfident perhaps. Electronic trails are difficult to erase completely." Sophia Wang stood abruptly. "I should check on the kitchen staff." "Sit down, Sophia," Jackson commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your role in this is well documented too. Feeding information to Phoenix, sabotaging Ms. Wei's presentations, all while drawing a generous salary from Han Enterprises." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elizabeth Lee was the first to recover, her aristocratic features hardening as she turned to Diana. "Is this true?" she demanded. "Did your family deliberately orchestrate this sordid scheme?" Diana's smile was strained. "Elizabeth, surely you understand business requires certain strategies. The historic district represents billions in potential development. It represents my son's vision for responsible urban renewal." Elizabeth cut her off icily. "A vision apparently incompatible with your family's greed." Jackson looked as surprised as everyone else by his mother's vehement defense. Elizabeth rose to her full height, suddenly every inch the formidable matriarch of the Lee dynasty. "The engagement between our families is permanently terminated," she announced formally. "The Lee family withdraws all social and business connections with the Chen family, effective immediately." Alexander Chen paled at the traditional formal pronouncement, a public severing of ties that would reverberate through their entire social and business circles. "Elizabeth, please," he began, but she silenced him with a raised hand. "My husband trusted your father. That trust has been betrayed." She turned to the board members. "Gentlemen, I believe we've seen enough to make appropriate decisions regarding Phoenix Development's proposals." As the board members murmured their agreement, Jackson addressed Diana directly. "The Han Enterprises legal team will be in touch regarding corporate espionage charges. In the meantime, I suggest you reconsider your approach to the historic district properties you've acquired. They would work beautifully as community-focused developments rather than luxury condominiums." Diana's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. "This isn't over, Jackson." "Actually, it is," he replied calmly. "Your dinner party, however, need not be. Please don't let my dramatic entrance ruin the excellent meal I'm sure you've prepared." With that, he offered his arm to his mother, who took it with a proud smile as they departed, followed by the board members, leaving Diana, Alexander, and Sophia alone with their exposed conspiracy. Back at Jackson's penthouse, Lily anxiously awaited news. She had called Thomas Grant as instructed, appearing to accept Phoenix's offer while buying time for Jackson's countermove. Now she paced the living room, wondering what was happening at Diana's dinner party. When her phone rang, she answered immediately. "Jackson? It's done," he said simply. "The board knows everything. Phoenix's plan has failed." Relief flooded through her. "And Diana? Alexander?" "Exposed and isolated. My mother," he sounded faintly amused, "formally severed all ties between our families, something she's wanted to do for years, apparently." "Your mother defended you?" Lily asked, surprised. "More surprising to me than anyone," Jackson admitted. "She's on her way here now. She wants to meet the woman at the center of this storm." Lily felt a flutter of panic. "Meet me? But I'm the person who helped expose a plot against Han. Enterprises," Jackson finished firmly. "The person whose work on the Historic District project has transformed our approach to urban development. The person who refused to betray her principles, even under extreme pressure." His words calmed her somewhat, but she still felt woefully underprepared to face Elizabeth Lee in a social context. When the elegant matriarch arrived 30 minutes later, she surveyed Lily with the same assessing gaze she'd used in their first meeting, but now with a hint of genuine curiosity. "Ms. Wei," she greeted her formally, "it seems I owe you an apology." Lily blinked in surprise. "An apology?" "I misjudged you based on incomplete information," Elizabeth acknowledged. "A mistake I rarely make and never admit to. Except, it seems tonight." Jackson watched this exchange with ill-concealed amazement as his mother continued. "It requires extraordinary character to resist the kind of pressure the Chens applied, particularly when family safety is involved." Elizabeth's expression softened fractionally. "Family loyalty is a quality the Lee dynasty has always valued highly." Something about her phrasing caught Lily's attention. "Dynasty?" Elizabeth smiled slightly. "An old-fashioned term perhaps, but accurate. The Lee family has built not just a company, but a legacy spanning generations." She glanced at her son. "A legacy that requires both strength and wisdom to maintain." The conversation was interrupted by Jackson's phone. As he stepped away to take the call, Elizabeth leaned closer to Lily. "My son is brilliant in business but not always discerning in personal matters," she said quietly. "His engagement to Diana was a mistake I recognized years before he did. He saw only what he wanted to see." "And what do you think he sees in me?" Lily asked boldly. Elizabeth's eyebrows rose slightly at her directness. "That remains to be determined. But whatever it is, it appears to be genuine. I haven't seen him fight this passionately for anyone since his father died." Before Lily could respond, Jackson returned, his expression grave. "We have a problem. Thomas Grant just called a meeting with our lawyers. Phoenix is claiming we hacked their systems to obtain the documents I presented tonight." "Did you?" Lily asked. "No. Every document came through legal channels, whistleblowers inside Phoenix, financial records obtained through court orders from previous cases." Jackson ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "But they're creating doubts, and doubts can be enough to derail the Historic District project." Elizabeth frowned thoughtfully. "They're buying time, trying to salvage something from this debacle." "Exactly." Jackson paced the room. "And they still have one significant advantage, their ownership of key properties in the district through Phoenix Development." "So what do we do?" Lily asked. Jackson stopped pacing, a determined look settling on his face. "We take the fight public. The Historic District isn't just a corporate project anymore. It's a community cause. Phoenix wants to build luxury condominiums that will price out current residents and businesses. We want to preserve the district's character while ensuring its economic future. A community versus corporation narrative." Elizabeth nodded approvingly. "Effective. But we need to move quickly," Jackson added. "Tomorrow morning, Han Enterprises announces its comprehensive plan for the district, with complete transparency about our approach, and Phoenix's competing vision. Lily thought of the families and business owners she'd worked with over the past months. The community will support us. They've been fighting against gentrification for years. Then we'll give them the platform and resources to fight effectively, Jackson decided, starting with a town hall meeting tomorrow evening in the heart of the district. As Jackson made calls to set the plan in motion, Elizabeth observed Lily thoughtfully. "You've changed him," she said quietly. "I've never seen Jackson so invested in the human element of a project." "I think he always cared," Lily replied. "He just never showed it." Elizabeth smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but caring and acting on that care are different things. The Jackson I know builds impressive structures. The Jackson I've seen tonight builds communities." The next morning, as Lily prepared to leave her apartment for what promised to be a momentous day, she found her father watching the early news with a puzzled expression. "Isn't this your company?" he asked, pointing to the screen where Jackson was giving a press conference, the historic district plans displayed prominently behind him. Lily sat beside her father, watching as Jackson passionately outlined the competing visions for the district's future: Han Enterprises' community-focused approach versus Phoenix Development's luxury redevelopment plans. Han Enterprises believes that true urban renewal preserves what makes neighborhoods special while building sustainable futures for existing residents and businesses, Jackson was saying. "We invite everyone who cares about the historic district to join us tonight at 7 p.m. at Garcia Community Center to share their vision for their neighborhood." As cameras flashed and reporters called questions, Richard Way studied his daughter's face. "You're in the middle of something important, aren't you?" "Yes," Lily admitted. "Something that matters." Richard nodded slowly. "I always knew you'd find your way to making a difference. Even as a little girl, you couldn't stand to see anyone left behind or forgotten." His simple faith in her brought unexpected tears to Lily's eyes. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you. About how I got the money for your surgery." Richard covered her hand with his. "Lily, I know." She stared at him in shock. "You know?" "Not the details," he clarified gently. "But I know my daughter. I know you would have moved heaven and earth to help me, even at great cost to yourself." His eyes were damp but clear. "Whatever you did out of love. That's all I need to know." Lily hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by his unconditional acceptance. "I love you, Dad. And I'm proud of you, little tiger," he whispered. "Now go change the world, or at least one corner of it." That evening, the Garcia Community Center overflowed with residents, business owners, and media. Jackson and Lily stood together on the small stage, surrounded by displays of the Han Enterprises' vision for the district. "Phoenix is sending representatives," Jackson murmured to Lily, "including Diana." "Let them come," Lily replied confidently. "This is our home field advantage." As the meeting began, Jackson surprised everyone by immediately yielding the floor to Lily. "Ms. Way has been the heart and soul of this project," he told the crowd. "She's worked directly with many of you over the past months, and no one understands the community's needs better." Taking the microphone, Lily felt a moment of nervousness that quickly dissolved as she recognized familiar faces in the audience: Mrs. Gonzalez from the restaurant, Mr. Patel from the hardware store, dozens of others who had shared their stories and dreams with her. "The historic district isn't just buildings and businesses," she began. "It's people and memories and traditions. It's where 3 generations gather at Chen's Bakery on Sunday mornings. It's where Mr. Patel has helped new immigrants find jobs for 30 years. It's where Mrs. Gonzalez makes empanadas from a recipe that traveled from her grandmother's village in Mexico." As she spoke passionately about preserving these intangible community assets while creating sustainable economic opportunities, Lily watched Diana Chen and Thomas Grant enter at the back of the room, their expressions cold and calculating. "Phoenix Development has purchased several properties in our district," Lily acknowledged directly. "Their plan would replace family businesses with luxury condominiums and high-end retail. They call it progress. We call it erasure. From the back, Diana approached a microphone set up for audience comments. Ms. Wei presents a touching but economically naive vision, she said smoothly. Phoenix offers property owners fair market value for their buildings, often struggling businesses, that would benefit from the opportunity to relocate or retire. Mrs. Gonzalez stood up from her seat. My restaurant isn't struggling, Ms. Chen. It's thriving because it serves its community. No amount of money could replace what we've built there. A chorus of agreement rose from other business owners. Mr. Patel spoke next, his voice strong despite his 70 years. Han Enterprises approached us as partners, not targets, he said. They asked what we needed to succeed, not what price would make us leave. Person after person rose to speak, sharing stories of how the district had shaped their lives and how the Han Enterprises plan would allow them to continue their traditions while creating new opportunities for the next generation. As the testimonials continued, Diana's confident expression gradually faltered. The narrative she had planned, corporate giant exploiting naive residents, was completely inverted. Here, Han Enterprises was the champion of the community, while Phoenix was the faceless developer threatening to destroy neighborhood character. Thomas Grant whispered something in Diana's ear. She nodded tensely, and they slipped out, clearly recognizing a lost cause. Jackson returned to the microphone as the meeting concluded. Thank you all for sharing your stories and your vision. Together we will ensure the historic district remains the heart and soul of this city for generations to come. The applause was thunderous. As people crowded forward to speak with Jackson and Lily, there was a palpable sense of unity and purpose in the room, a community that had found its voice and its champions. Later that night, as Jackson's driver took them back to Han Tower to debrief with the project team, Lily felt a profound sense of accomplishment. We did it, she said, still processing the evening's success. The battle, not the war, Jackson cautioned, though he was clearly pleased. Phoenix still owns those properties. Diana and Alexander won't surrender easily. But we have something they don't, Lily pointed out. The community behind us. Public opinion. Jackson smiled slightly. Indeed. And speaking of public opinion, he handed her his tablet, displaying a news site where their town hall was already making headlines. Historic District residents unite behind Han Enterprises' vision. As Lily scrolled through the article, she found quotes from residents praising the community-centered approach and specifically mentioning her by name as the driving force connecting corporate interests with neighborhood needs. You're becoming something of a local hero, Jackson observed. Lily shook her head, embarrassed. I just listened. To people who are rarely heard. That alone makes you exceptional in this business. Jackson's voice held unexpected warmth. Most developers see only property values and profit margins. You see the human ecosystem that makes a neighborhood worth preserving. Lily looked up to find him watching her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, the professional masks they both wore seemed to slip, revealing something deeper, more personal. The car slowed as they approached Han Tower, breaking the moment. As they rode the elevator up to the executive floor where the team waited, Jackson spoke quietly. Whatever happens next with Phoenix, I want you to know that your work has permanently changed how Han Enterprises approaches development. That's a legacy that will outlast this project. The doors opened, and they stepped back into their professional roles, the powerful CEO and his community engagement specialist. But something had shifted between them, something neither was quite ready to name but both increasingly unwilling to deny. In the boardroom, the project team awaited them, eager to hear about the town hall's success. As Lily began describing the community's response, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've won this round, Ms. Wei. The promised night. Join us on this journey. Before we start, share your location in the comments and enjoy the experience. The Historic District project gained momentum in the weeks following the town hall meeting. Local media praised Han Enterprises' innovative approach to urban renewal, community support strengthened, and even skeptical city officials began endorsing the plan. For Lily, the work had become more than a job. It was a mission that aligned perfectly with her values. One bright Tuesday morning, she arrived at her office to find a large envelope on her desk marked "Confidential, Community Engagement Team Only." Inside were preliminary designs for a community education center to be built on one of the district's vacant lots, a key component of their revitalization plan that Jackson had accelerated based on her recommendations. "These are beautiful," she murmured, spreading the renderings across her desk. The design incorporated architectural elements from various cultures represented in the district, creating a space that felt both modern and respectful of the area's heritage. "I thought you'd approve," Jackson said from her doorway, startling her. "They're perfect," Lily replied, genuinely moved by how thoroughly the architects had incorporated community input. "The residents will be thrilled." Jackson entered, closing the door behind him. "We've scheduled the groundbreaking ceremony for next Friday. The mayor, city council, and press will all be there. As the driving force behind the community engagement strategy, you should deliver the keynote address." Lily looked up in surprise. "Me? Not you? This project succeeded because you bridged the gap between corporate interests and community needs," Jackson said simply. "You should be the one to present our vision to the world." Before she could respond, Jackson's phone buzzed. Checking it, his expression darkened. Momentarily. "Diana Chen is demanding a meeting. Again. What does she want now?" Lily asked. "To negotiate," Jackson replied, pocketing his phone. "Phoenix's properties in the district have lost significant value since our community plan gained traction. They can't develop luxury condominiums in a neighborhood now officially designated for cultural preservation. So they're finally admitting defeat?" "Diana Chen never admits defeat," Jackson corrected. "She recalibrates and attacks from a different angle. I suspect she's looking for a face-saving way to partner with Han Enterprises rather than oppose us." He moved to leave, then paused. "The ceremonial shovel. Excuse me? For the groundbreaking, silver with an engraved handle or traditional with a simple ribbon?" The unexpected question, so mundane amidst their high-stakes corporate maneuvering, made Lily smile. "Traditional. This is about the community, not corporate showmanship." Jackson nodded approvingly. "My thought exactly." After he left, Lily turned her attention to preparing her keynote speech, determined to honor both the community's vision and Han Enterprises' commitment to responsible development. She was so absorbed in her work that she barely noticed when Sophia Wang appeared in her doorway. "Well, aren't you the golden girl?" Sophia remarked, her tone acidic despite her pleasant smile. "From elementary school teacher to corporate keynote speaker in 6 months. Quite the meteoric rise." Lily sighed internally but maintained her professional demeanor. Despite being exposed as Phoenix's informant, Sophia had somehow avoided termination, likely due to her family connections on the board. "Was there something you needed, Sophia?" "Jackson asked me to bring you the updated attendee list for the groundbreaking," she said, placing a folder on Lily's desk. "Very impressive names. The governor is even considering attending." Lily nodded her thanks, hoping Sophia would leave, but the woman lingered. "You know it won't last, don't you?" Sophia asked, her voice softer now, almost sympathetic. Jackson Lee has a pattern. He finds someone new and interesting, elevates them dramatically, then loses interest just as quickly. I've seen it happen to executives far more qualified than you. "Is there a point to this, Sophia?" Lily asked, tiring of the veiled hostility. Sophia's smile tightened. "Just friendly advice from someone who's been here longer. Don't mistake professional appreciation for anything more. The Ice Emperor doesn't do personal attachments. Diana Chen was the closest anyone came to breaking through, and we all know how that ended." After Sophia finally left, Lily found herself unsettled by the conversation. While she knew better than to trust Sophia's friendly advice, the words had struck a nerve. Her relationship with Jackson had evolved beyond purely professional. There were moments of connection, of understanding that felt increasingly personal. Yet he remained largely unreadable, maintaining careful boundaries even as those boundaries seemed to shift. That evening, working late to finalize her speech, Lily was surprised when Elizabeth Lee appeared at her office door. "Ms. Wei," the elegant woman greeted her. "Still here at this hour?" "Mrs. Lee." Lily stood respectfully. "Yes, I'm preparing for the groundbreaking ceremony." "So I heard. Jackson mentioned you'll be delivering the keynote." Elizabeth entered the office, glancing around with subtle assessment. "A significant honor." "I'm grateful for the opportunity," Lily replied carefully, unable to read Elizabeth's purpose in seeking her out. "My son seldom delegates the spotlight," Elizabeth observed, settling gracefully into a chair across from Lily. "He must have extraordinary confidence in you." There was a question in her statement that Lily wasn't sure how to answer. "The project is important to him, to all of us." Elizabeth studied her thoughtfully. "You're different from his usual executives, less polished perhaps, but more authentic. I begin to see why he values your perspective." The backhanded compliment was typical of Elizabeth's communication style, simultaneously acknowledging Lily's worth while reminding her of her outsider status. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss, Mrs. Lee?" Lily asked directly. Elizabeth smiled slightly, appreciating her forthrightness. "Actually, yes. The Chen family has made overtures through mutual connections. They're seeking a private meeting with Jackson before the groundbreaking, a last attempt at salvaging something from this situation. And you're telling me because Diana specifically requested your presence as well." Elizabeth watched her reaction carefully. "She claims the community would be better served by cooperation between Han Enterprises and Phoenix, rather than continued opposition." Lily frowned. "That doesn't sound like Diana. She's never shown any genuine interest in the community's welfare." "Indeed," Elizabeth agreed, "which suggests an ulterior motive. Jackson is inclined to decline the meeting entirely, but I thought you might have insights given your history with the Chens." Lily considered the situation carefully. "If they're asking for a meeting now, right before our groundbreaking ceremony, they must be desperate. They've lost the public relations battle and their property investments are devalued. Maybe they genuinely want to negotiate. Or perhaps they're planning one final attempt to derail the project," Elizabeth suggested. "A desperate opponent is often the most dangerous." "What do you think they might do?" Elizabeth's perfectly manicured fingers tapped thoughtfully on her purse. "The Chens rarely attack directly. They prefer to undermine from within, to find vulnerabilities and exploit them. Your connection to Victoria Jiang remains their most likely avenue." "But that's been neutralized," Lily pointed out. "The board already knows everything." "The board knows. The public doesn't," Elizabeth corrected. "There's a substantial difference between a private corporate matter and a public scandal. Jackson has protected you from the latter, but the Chens could still choose the nuclear option if they feel truly cornered." The implications were chilling. While Lily had come to terms with her past within Han Enterprises, public exposure would devastate her father and potentially undermine everything they'd built with the historic district project. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We prepare," Elizabeth replied simply. "If you and Jackson meet with them, it should be on our terms, with contingency plans in place." She rose to leave, then added, "I've misjudged you previously, Ms. Wei. I hope you won't make the same mistake regarding the Chens. They are never more dangerous than when they appear to be surrendering." Later that night, as Lily finally left the office, she found Jackson waiting by the elevators. "My mother spoke with you," he said. "It wasn't a question." "About the Chen's meeting request, yes?" Jackson nodded, his expression unreadable as they entered the elevator together. "What's your assessment?" "Probably a trap," Lily replied honestly, "but possibly an opportunity to finally resolve this conflict. Either way, we should be prepared for the worst." A hint of a smile touched Jackson's lips. "My mother said almost exactly the same thing. She rarely approves of my executive decisions, yet she seems increasingly aligned with yours." The elevator reached the parking garage where Jackson's driver waited with the car. To Lily's surprise, Jackson opened the door for her. "I thought you might join me for dinner," he said, noticing her hesitation. "To discuss strategy for handling the Chens, unless you have other plans." The invitation was professional on the surface, yet something in his tone suggested it might be more. Lily found herself accepting despite her exhaustion. They dined at a small, elegant restaurant overlooking the river, private enough for discreet conversation but public enough to maintain professional boundaries. As they discussed potential approaches to the Chen's meeting request, Lily was struck by how naturally they had fallen into a partnership of equals, despite the vast differences in their positions and backgrounds. "You're unusually quiet," Jackson observed as they finished their meal. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Lily admitted. 6 months ago, I was grading spelling tests and worrying about my father's health. Now I'm helping reshape an entire district and strategizing against corporate rivals. "Do you miss teaching?" he asked, surprising her with the personal question. Lily considered it honestly. Sometimes. The connections with the children, watching them grow and learn. But this work, making a difference on a larger scale, helping entire communities, it's fulfilling in a different way. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "You've found your true calling, I think. Teaching was never just about spelling tests for you, any more than development is just about buildings for me." "What is it about for you?" Lily asked, genuinely curious about what drove the enigmatic CEO. Jackson was silent. For a moment, gazing out at the city lights reflected on the river. "Legacy," he finally said. "Not just constructing buildings, but creating spaces that improve how people live. My father built impressive structures. I want to build communities that endure." His rare moment of personal disclosure touched Lily deeply. "That's why the historic district matters so much to you. It's not just another project." "No," he agreed softly. "It's a template for what development could be, should be. And you've been instrumental in shaping that vision." Their eyes met across the table, the professional facade momentarily slipping to reveal something warmer, more personal. The moment stretched between them filled with unspoken possibilities. Jackson's phone shattered the silence. He checked it reluctantly. "Diana. She's quite persistent. What does she want now?" "To confirm our meeting tomorrow. Evening at Chen Global headquarters." He looked at Lily questioningly. "I haven't agreed yet. Your thoughts?" Lily took a deep breath. "I think we should meet them. On our terms, as your mother suggested. If there's any chance to resolve this conflict before the groundbreaking, it's worth pursuing. And if it's a trap, then we spring it deliberately," Lily said with more confidence than she felt. "Better to confront whatever they're planning now than have it explode during the ceremony." Jackson studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Tomorrow evening, then. We'll face the lions together." The next day passed in a blur of preparations. Lily finalized her keynote speech while Jackson coordinated security measures for both the Chen meeting and the upcoming groundbreaking ceremony. By late afternoon, when they departed for Chen Global headquarters, both felt as prepared as possible for whatever Diana and Alexander might have planned. The Chen Global building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the city's financial district, impressive but coldly impersonal, much like Diana herself. In the elevator ascending to the executive floor, Lily fought against rising anxiety. "Remember," Jackson said quietly, "we control this interaction, not them. Whatever they present, whatever they threaten, we've anticipated it." Lily nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. When the elevator doors opened, they were greeted by Thomas Grant, who led them to a luxurious conference room where Diana and Alexander waited. "Jackson, Ms. Wei," Diana greeted them with practiced cordiality. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Jackson replied coolly. "Your message indicated you have a proposal regarding Phoenix's properties in the historic district." Diana smiled thinly. "Direct as always, very well." She slid a folder across the polished table. Phoenix Development is prepared to sell its holdings in the district to Han Enterprises at fair market value. Jackson didn't touch the folder. And what prompted this sudden change of heart? Business realities, Alexander replied smoothly. The cultural preservation designations have limited our development options, and continued opposition serves neither family's interests. So you're surrendering, Lily stated bluntly. Diana's smile hardened. Recalibrating. The Chen family has many business interests. This particular battle no longer justifies the resources required. Jackson finally opened the folder, examining the property details and proposed terms. These valuations are pre-designation. The properties are worth significantly less now that luxury development is restricted. Consider it the cost of peace between our families, Diana suggested. A gesture of goodwill. And what do you want in return? Lily asked, certain there was more to their proposal. Besides an inflated price? Diana and Alexander exchanged glances before Diana continued. Just one small addition to tomorrow's groundbreaking ceremony. We'd like Alexander to be recognized as a contributing partner in the Community Education Center. Absolutely not, Jackson replied immediately. The Education Center is a Han Enterprises initiative developed with the community. A small courtesy to help heal the rift between our families, Alexander said reasonably. The Chen name associated with education rather than luxury development would help rehabilitate our image in the district. This isn't about image rehabilitation, Lily objected. The community knows exactly who supported their vision and who tried to replace their homes with condominiums. Diana's pleasant mask slipped slightly. Perhaps we should discuss this more privately. She glanced pointedly at Lily. Between family representatives. Ms. Wei stays, Jackson stated firmly. She represents the community interest in this project. Of course. Diana's smile returned, though her eyes remained cold. We simply thought certain aspects of the discussion might be uncomfortable, given Ms. Wei's history with our family. The veiled threat hung in the air. Lily met Diana's gaze, steadily, refusing to be intimidated. If you're referring to my interaction with Victoria Jiang's agency, that matter has been resolved, she said calmly. The board is fully aware of the circumstances. The board, yes, Alexander acknowledged. But the public, the press, the community members you've worked so closely with, they might view things differently if certain documents were to surface during tomorrow's high-profile ceremony. And there it was, the trap they had anticipated. Jackson's expression remained impassive, but Lily could sense his controlled anger. Blackmail is an interesting negotiating tactic, he observed coldly, not particularly subtle. We prefer to think of it as mutually assured consequences, Diana replied. You've damaged our business interests and family reputation. We simply want a small concession and fair compensation for our properties. In exchange for burying evidence you manufactured, Lily added, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Alexander spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. Everyone benefits. Han Enterprises acquires our properties, completing your vision for the district. The Chen family saves face. Through association with the Education Center, and Ms. Wei's personal history remains private. Jackson stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Whatever documents you believe you have, whatever threats you're preparing to execute, proceed at your own risk. Han Enterprises does not respond to blackmail. Diana's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing the anger beneath. You're making a mistake, Jackson. This was your opportunity to resolve matters cleanly. There's nothing clean about your proposal, he replied, his voice glacial. Ms. Wei, shall we? As they turned to leave, Diana called after them. The ceremony begins at 10 a.m. tomorrow, correct? We'll be there, with copies for the press of some very interesting reading material. In the elevator descending from Chen Global's offices, Lily finally allowed herself to react, her hands trembling slightly. They're really going to do it. They're going to expose everything, ruin the ceremony, humiliate me publicly. Jackson's expression was resolute. No, they're not. You heard them. I heard desperate people making desperate threats, he interrupted firmly. Diana and Alexander expected us to capitulate immediately. When we didn't, they showed their hand too early. Lily looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? They gave us nearly 18 hours warning of their exact plan. Jackson explained, checking his watch. More than enough time to execute our countermeasures. Back in the car, Jackson immediately made a series of phone calls to his mother, the legal team, the head of security, even the mayor's office. Lily listened in growing amazement as a comprehensive contingency plan unfolded, clearly prepared well in advance for exactly this scenario. You anticipated everything, she said, when he finally ended the last call. Not everything, Jackson admitted, but enough. The Chen's playbook is surprisingly predictable once you understand their priorities. Face, reputation, appearing to win even when losing. Will it be enough to stop them? Jackson's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. Lily, do you trust me? The question was simple but profound. After everything they'd been through, the manipulation, the half-truths, the gradual building of a partnership that had become something more, did she truly trust Jackson Lee? Yes, she answered without hesitation. I do. Then believe me when I say that by this time tomorrow, Diana and Alexander Chen will regret ever threatening you. His voice held absolute certainty. The groundbreaking ceremony will proceed exactly as planned. The historic district project will move forward, and your reputation will remain intact. His confidence steadied her, but another concern lingered. And what about your family's relationship with the Chens? Your mother said they've been connected for generations. Something like regret flickered across Jackson's face. Some connections become liabilities rather than assets. My father maintained the alliance out of respect for tradition. I need to make decisions based on the future, not the past. They rode in contemplative silence for several minutes before Jackson spoke again. Tomorrow's ceremony isn't just about breaking ground on a building, he said quietly. It's about establishing a new model for development, one that values community as much as profit. Whatever the Chens do, whatever happens with our families, that vision is worth fighting for. His words resonated deeply with Lily. This wasn't just about her personal reputation or even Jackson's business interests. It was about the future of the district and the people who called it home. Then we'll fight for it, she resolved. Together. The morning of the groundbreaking ceremony dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of their plans for the historic district. Lily dressed carefully, in a professional but approachable outfit, a blue suit that projected authority while still feeling true to her teaching roots. Her father insisted on attending, despite her concerns about the Chen's threats. I've spent my life watching my students face their challenges, he told her firmly. I won't. I hide while my daughter faces hers. At the ceremony site, a vacant lot soon to become the community education center, workers had erected a stage, chairs, and a large tent for the reception afterward. Colorful banners celebrated the district's multicultural heritage, while displays showcased the community-centered design plans. Lily arrived early to check final arrangements, surprised to find Jackson already there, conferring quietly with security personnel strategically positioned throughout the area. Everything in place? She asked, joining him. Everything, he confirmed, looking more formally CEO-like than usual in his perfectly tailored suit. Diana and Alexander are expected to arrive approximately 15 minutes before the ceremony begins. They'll be appropriately welcomed. Something in his tone suggested that welcome would be anything but warm. Before Lily could ask for details, Elizabeth Lee appeared, elegant as always in a cream-colored ensemble that somehow managed to be both formal and approachable. Ms. Wei, she greeted Lily with unexpected warmth. Your speech is prepared? Yes, though I'm still nervous, Lily admitted. Elizabeth nodded understandingly. Public speaking becomes easier with practice, though the stakes are seldom as personal as they are today. As guests began arriving, community members, city officials, press. Lily took her place on the stage alongside Jackson, Elizabeth, and key project team members. From her vantage point, she could see her father being escorted to a reserved seat in the front row, his face beaming with pride despite his still recovering health. 10 minutes before the scheduled start, a ripple of tension moved through the security team. Through their earpieces came the confirmation. Diana and Alexander Chen had arrived, accompanied by Thomas Grant and several men carrying briefcases who appeared to be lawyers. Jackson exchanged a subtle nod with the head of security, who immediately directed his team to smoothly intercept the Chen party before they could approach the press section where several reporters were already setting up. From the stage, Lily couldn't hear the exchange, but she could see Diana's expression shift from confident determination to confusion and then anger as security personnel politely but firmly directed her group to a cordoned-off seating area, far from both the media and the stage. "What's happening?" Lily whispered to Jackson. "Phase 1, he replied quietly. Containment. As the ceremony's scheduled start time approached, the mayor arrived, followed by several city council members. To Lily's surprise, many prominent business leaders were also in attendance, competitors of Han Enterprises who rarely supported Jackson's initiatives. The master of ceremonies, a respected community leader, called the event to order. After a brief welcome and acknowledgments, he invited Jackson to the podium for opening remarks. Jackson spoke briefly but powerfully about Han Enterprises' vision for responsible development, emphasizing community partnership rather than corporate imposition. He then did something unexpected. He invited representatives from each of the district's major cultural communities to the stage, presenting them with symbolic keys. "The historic district isn't ours to transform," he told the audience. "It's yours to preserve and enhance, with Han Enterprises as your partner rather than your developer. These keys represent our commitment that no decision about this community will be made without this community." The gesture, unplanned in the official program, drew enthusiastic applause. Lily noticed Diana Chen attempting to approach a reporter during the commotion, only to be smoothly intercepted again by security. When Jackson introduced Lily as the ceremony's keynote speaker, her nervousness momentarily returned. But as she took her place at the podium and looked out at the audience, seeing her father's proud smile, the hopeful faces of community members she'd worked with for months, Jackson's quiet confidence in her, she found her voice. Her speech wove together the personal stories of district residents with the practical vision of Han Enterprises' development plan. She spoke of Mrs. Gonzalez's restaurant where 3 generations worked side by side, of Mr. Patel's hardware store that had become an informal community center, of the Ukrainian bakery where wedding traditions from the old country were preserved in delicate pastries. "This education center will be more than a building," she concluded, her voice strong with conviction. "It will be a bridge between past and future, a place where cultural heritage is celebrated while creating new opportunities for the next generation. Together, we aren't just preserving a district, we're nurturing a living community." The applause was immediate and heartfelt. As Lily stepped back from the podium, she caught sight of Diana and Alexander, their expressions tight with frustrated anger as they realized their moment for disruption was slipping away. The ceremonial groundbreaking followed. Jackson, Lily, the mayor, and community representatives each taking turns with the traditional shovel to symbolically begin construction. Photographers captured the moment from every angle, creating images that would represent the project in the media for months to come. As the formal program concluded and attendees moved toward the reception tent, Lily saw Diana Chen finally break away from her security escort, heading directly for a cluster of reporters with Thomas Grant at her side, a folder clutched in her hand. "Jackson," Lily whispered urgently, nodding toward the approaching threat. "Right on schedule," he replied calmly. Phase 2. Before Diana could reach the reporters, Elizabeth Lee smoothly intercepted her, accompanied by 2 distinguished-looking men Lily didn't recognize. "Diana, dear," Elizabeth's voice carried. clearly despite her seemingly private greeting. "You remember Judge Morrison and District Attorney Collins? They were just asking about Victoria Zhang's interesting business practices. Such a shame about the federal investigation, isn't it?" Diana froze mid-stride, her face paling visibly. The folder in her hand suddenly seemed to weigh heavier. Elizabeth continued pleasantly. "They're particularly interested in corporate blackmail schemes, coercion, and manipulating medical insurance claims to create vulnerability. I believe you might have insights to share." Alexander appeared at Diana's side, his customary smooth confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. "Elizabeth, surely we can discuss family matters privately." "Family matters, yes," Elizabeth agreed, her smile razor-sharp. "Criminal matters, however, belong in the justice system. Unless, of course, you've reconsidered your approach to today's events." The standoff lasted only moments, but to Lily, watching from a short distance away, it seemed to stretch eternally. Finally, Diana lowered the folder, her expression one of calculated submission. "It seems we've had a misunderstanding," she said, stiffly. "The Chen family wishes only to congratulate Han Enterprises on this community initiative." "How gracious," Elizabeth replied, her victory absolute but understated. "I'm sure your congratulations are deeply appreciated." As Diana and Alexander retreated, followed by their lawyers and a visibly confused Thomas Grant, Lily felt a wave of relief so powerful her knees nearly buckled. Jackson appeared at her side, steadying her discreetly. "What just happened?" she asked quietly. "My mother happened," Jackson replied with something like bemused respect. "She's been building a case against Victoria Zhang's operation for months, gathering evidence that implicates the Chen family in multiple criminal enterprises. Diana and Alexander just discovered that their blackmail attempt would trigger not just a social scandal, but potential federal charges." "Your mother did that? For me?" Jackson's expression softened. "For you, for me, for the Lee family's integrity. My mother's motivations are always complicated, but her execution is flawless." The rest of the event unfolded perfectly. Community members celebrating, media capturing the positive story of neighborhood revitalization, city officials praising Han Enterprises' innovative approach. The Chen contingent departed quickly and quietly, their threats neutralized by Elizabeth Lee's masterful countermove. As the ceremony concluded, Lily found herself surrounded by well-wishers, including her father, who embraced her proudly. "You were magnificent," Richard told her, his eyes damp. "Your mother would have been so proud." The mention of her mother, gone for so many years but still so present in their hearts, brought tears to Lily's eyes. "I wish she could have seen this." "She did," Richard assured her, "through you." Later, as the crowd thinned and workers began dismantling the stage, Jackson approached Lily and her father. "Mr. Wei," he greeted Richard respectfully, "I hope you enjoyed the ceremony." "Very much," Richard replied, studying the young CEO with the assessment of a lifelong educator. "Though I enjoyed watching my daughter shine even more." Jackson smiled, a genuine expression rarely seen in his public persona. "On that, we are in complete agreement." An understanding passed between the two men. Mutual respect, shared appreciation for Lily's capabilities. Perhaps something more that neither was ready to articulate. "Dad, why don't you head home with Michael?" Lily suggested, noticing her father's growing fatigue. "I need to help with some wrap-up details." After Richard departed, Lily turned to Jackson. "So it's really over? The Chens are defeated?" "Strategically neutralized," Jackson corrected. "They'll regroup eventually, but not against this project, not against you. My mother's intervention ensured that." "I should thank her," Lily realized. "She's already left," Jackson informed her, "but she did ask me to tell you she found your speech surprisingly compelling." From Elizabeth Lee, that's essentially a standing ovation. The site was nearly empty now, the ceremonial groundbreaking complete, the area secured for actual construction to begin the following week. Standing together in the fading afternoon light, with the district spreading around them, Lily felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than anything in her previous career. "We really did it," she said softly. "Against all odds." "You did it," Jackson corrected. "Your vision, your connection with the community, your refusal to be intimidated. I just provided the corporate resources." "A rather significant contribution," Lily pointed out with a smile. Jackson glanced around to ensure they were truly alone before speaking again, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Lily, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Something not related to the project." Her heart quickened at his tone. "Yes?" "These past months working together, facing challenges side by side, they've meant a great deal to me," he began carefully. "More than I anticipated. More than I've allowed myself to acknowledge." Lily waited, hardly daring to breathe as Jackson Lee, the Ice Emperor, the untouchable CEO, struggled visibly to express personal feelings. "What I'm trying to say, rather ineptly," he continued, "is that I hope our collaboration doesn't end with this project. That perhaps we might explore—" His words were cut short by the sharp ring of his phone. Checking it, Jackson frowned. "It's the mayor. I need to take this." The moment shattered, leaving Lily suspended between anticipation and disappointment as Jackson stepped away to take the call. When he returned minutes later, his expression had shifted back to professional mode. "City Council emergency session," he explained. "A last-minute zoning issue that could affect construction permits. I need to address it immediately." "Of course," Lily replied, masking her disappointment. "The project comes first." Jackson hesitated, clearly torn between his corporate responsibilities and the personal conversation they'd begun. "Lily, what I was trying to say can wait," she finished for him, offering an understanding smile. "The historic district can't. Go. We'll talk later." As she watched him depart, Lily wondered if later would ever truly come, or if these almost moments would remain their pattern. Professional collaboration occasionally illuminated by personal connection, but never quite crossing into acknowledged territory. What she couldn't know was that across town, Diana Chen was far from defeated. In a private conference room at Chen Global headquarters, she met with Sophia Wang and Victoria Zhang, their expressions grim but determined. "Elizabeth Lee outmaneuvered us today," Diana acknowledged coldly. But she made one critical miscalculation. "What's that?" Sophia asked. Diana's smile was chilling in its calculation. "She assumed we needed the press to execute our plan. We don't. We only need one strategic moment, one public humiliation." Victoria Zhang nodded understanding. "The project gala next week. Everyone who matters will be there. The board, the mayor, community leaders. And Lily Wei, in the spotlight as Jackson's honored guest." Diana confirmed. "The perfect stage for our final act." As blueprints for the historic district education center were spread across the table, the three women began plotting their most audacious move yet, one that would target not just Lily's reputation, but the heart of the project itself, catching even the vigilant Jackson Lee entirely off guard. The trap had failed today, but a more elaborate one was already being set, one designed not merely to embarrass, but to destroy. The Historic District Project Gala was scheduled exactly 1 week after the groundbreaking ceremony, designed to celebrate the official launch of the Comprehensive Redevelopment Plan. Han Tower's grand ballroom had been transformed into an elegant showcase, with architectural models, digital displays, and artistic renderings illustrating the community-centered vision that had captured the city's imagination. For Lily, the event represented both professional triumph and personal anxiety. As the recognized face of the Community Engagement Initiative, she would be prominently featured throughout the evening, sharing the spotlight with Jackson in a way that blurred the boundaries between their professional partnership and their increasingly complex personal connection. "You're overthinking it," her brother Michael observed as he watched her try on a third outfit in her small apartment. "Just wear something that makes you feel confident." "Easy for you to say," Lily replied, discarding another dress. You've never had to navigate corporate politics in formal wear. Michael lounged on her bed, scrolling through his phone. Since the Chen's blackmail attempt had exposed his gambling debts, he'd been making genuine efforts to address his addiction, attending support meetings and rebuilding his relationship with his sister and father. Politics, huh? He teased. Is that what we're calling your thing with Jackson Lee these days? Lily shot him a warning glance like there is, there. No thing. We're colleagues who respect each other's work. Right, Michael drawled skeptically. That's why he calls here personally instead of having his assistant do it. Why he sent Dad that specialist from Johns Hopkins for a consultation. Why he looks at you like what? Lily interrupted, suddenly intensely interested despite herself. Michael's expression softened. Like you matter, Lil. Not just professionally. Like you really matter to him. His unexpected sincerity caught her off guard. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Elizabeth Lee of all people. Wear the blue dress from Carson's. Car will collect you at 7. Lily stared at her phone in confusion. How does Jackson's mother know? 1 year after the historic district groundbreaking ceremony, the education center stood complete. A harmonious blend of modern function and historic character that embodied everything the project represented. Its classrooms, community spaces, and small business incubators had already become a vibrant hub for neighborhood activities, exactly as Lily had envisioned. On the building's rooftop garden, staff prepared for the official dedication ceremony scheduled for that afternoon. Chairs were arranged facing a small podium. Colorful banners representing the district's diverse cultural heritage fluttered in the gentle spring breeze, and photographers positioned themselves for the best angles of the ceremony, with the city skyline as backdrop. In a small office on the center's top floor, Lily reviewed her speech one final time. The past year had brought changes she could never have anticipated when she first signed Victoria Zhang's contract out of desperate love for her father. Now Richard Wei was not only fully recovered but thriving as the education center's senior advisor, sharing decades of teaching wisdom with a new generation of educators. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Ready? Jackson asked, entering with 2 cups of coffee. No longer just her boss, he had become her partner in every sense of the word. Professional, personal, emotional. Almost, she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Though I'm still not sure I should be the one giving the keynote. This is your company's achievement. Jackson shook his head, setting his cup down to adjust his tie in the small office mirror. The Historic District Foundation is your achievement, Lily. Han Enterprises merely provided resources. She smiled at his deliberate understatement. Over the past year, Jackson had transformed Han Enterprises' entire approach to development, creating the independent foundation Lily now led, and establishing new corporate policies that prioritized community preservation alongside profit. The historic district model was being replicated in 3 other cities, with more planned for the coming year. Have you seen the post this morning? Jackson asked, pulling out his phone to show her the business section headline, Chen Global Investments faces bankruptcy amid criminal charges. Lily scanned the article describing Diana and Alexander Chen's dramatic fall. From Grace. After their exposure at the gala, investigations had uncovered extensive corporate espionage, blackmail, and fraud throughout their operations. Victoria Zhang had cooperated with authorities, receiving limited immunity in exchange for detailed testimony about the Chen's criminal enterprises. I almost feel sorry for them, Lily admitted, handing back the phone. Your capacity for compassion remains remarkable, Jackson observed with a hint of amusement. Personally, I consider it appropriate justice for what they tried to do to you. Lily moved to straighten his already perfect tie, using the gesture as an excuse to stand closer. They did us a favor in a way. Without their schemes and threats, we might never have discovered what we could accomplish together. Perhaps, Jackson conceded, catching her hand in his. Though I prefer to believe we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are simply meant to be. Their eyes met in silent understanding of how completely their lives had intertwined. From that first night of desperate arrangement to this moment of shared triumph. Over the past year, they had carefully navigated the transition. From employer-employee to partners, Jackson stepping back to allow Lily to establish the foundation's independence while remaining its strongest supporter. "Oh, I almost forgot," Jackson said, reaching into his pocket. "My mother asked me to give you this before the ceremony." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside rested an exquisite jade pendant on a fine gold chain. "It's beautiful," Lily murmured, lifting it carefully. "It belonged to my grandmother," Jackson explained. "In our family, it's traditionally given to the woman who will lead the next generation of Lees." The significance wasn't lost on Lily. Elizabeth Lee, who had once viewed her with skepticism and suspicion, was now making a profound statement about her place in the family's future. "Your mother has come a long way from thinking I was just an unqualified hire with a suspicious background," Lily observed, turning so. Jackson could fasten the necklace. His fingers lingered at the nape of her neck. "My mother recognizes quality and integrity when she sees it, eventually. She just has a rather extensive testing process." "Is that what the past year has been? A test?" Lily teased. "More like an extended job interview." "For the most important position in the Lee dynasty," Jackson replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. "One you've passed with distinction, according to my mother." Before Lily could respond to this intriguing statement, there was another knock at the door. Michael poked his head in, looking surprisingly professional in a tailored suit, another transformation of the past year. After confronting his gambling addiction, he had discovered a talent for project management and now worked with the foundation coordinating community initiatives. "They're ready for you both downstairs," he announced. "Dad's already seated with the mayor, and Mrs. Lee is intimidating the city council members as we speak." "We'll be right there," Lily assured him. After Michael departed, she turned back to Jackson. "What did you mean about the most important position in the Lee dynasty?" Jackson took both her hands in his, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I had planned to do this more formally after the ceremony, but..." He took a deep breath. "The past year has shown me what's truly possible when vision and values align, when partnership becomes more than a business arrangement." Understanding dawned as Jackson reached into his jacket pocket and lowered himself to one knee, presenting a ring that perfectly balanced elegance and significance, a stunning emerald-cut diamond flanked by smaller stones. "Lily Wei, you transformed my approach to business, my understanding of community, and most importantly, my capacity for love. Will you bring that same transformation to the rest of our lives? Will you marry me?" Though they had discussed marriage hypothetically, the reality of this moment caught her completely by surprise. Tears welled in her eyes as the journey of the past 18 months flashed through her mind, from that desperate night at Alexander Chen's mansion to this moment of profound connection and possibility. "Yes," she whispered. Then more confidently, "Yes, Jackson, I will." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When he rose to kiss her, it felt like sealing a promise that had been forming since their very first meeting. A promise of partnership that transcended business, family expectations, and even their different worlds. "Perfect timing as always, Mr. Lee," Lily teased as they reluctantly separated. "Proposing minutes before we're due on stage." Jackson smiled, the private smile only she ever saw. "I've learned from you that the best moments can't always be scheduled into a corporate timeline." They descended to the main floor together, where gathered dignitaries, community members, and media waited for the dedication ceremony to begin. As they appeared, Lily noticed her father's face light up with recognition. He had spotted the ring immediately, despite the distance. Elizabeth Lee approached them first, elegant as always in a tailored suit that somehow complemented Lily's more approachable style. Her glance went immediately to the jade pendant at Lily's throat, then to the ring on her finger, and finally to her son's face, which apparently told her everything she needed to know. "Well done," she murmured, kissing Jackson's cheek before turning to embrace Lily with unexpected warmth. "Welcome To the family, my dear, though I suspect you've been part of it longer than any of us realized. The ceremony proceeded with speeches from the mayor, community leaders, and Han Enterprises executives. When it was Lily's turn to speak, she approached the podium feeling the comforting weight of the jade pendant and the unfamiliar but welcome presence of Jackson's ring on her finger. 1 year ago, she began, looking out at faces that had become dear to her. We broke ground on this site with a vision of what might be possible when development serves community rather than replacing it. Today, we celebrate not just a building, but a new approach to how we grow our cities, one that honors the past while creating opportunity for the future. As she spoke about the Education Center's programs and the broader Historic District Initiative, Lily felt a profound sense of purpose. This work, preserving neighborhood character while ensuring economic viability, had become her vocation. The foundation she now led was implementing similar models in communities nationwide, proving that development didn't have to mean displacement. None of this would have been possible, she continued, without the vision and commitment of Jackson Lee, who recognized that true legacy isn't measured in square footage or profit margins, but in lives enhanced and communities strengthened. Their eyes met across the gathering, a moment of private connection amidst the public ceremony. In his face, Lily saw not just the powerful CEO or even her future husband, but her true partner, someone who had grown alongside her, challenging and supporting her in equal measure. After the formal ribbon cutting, guests mingled in the center's main hall, admiring the architecture that blended historic elements with modern functionality. Mrs. Gonzalez from the restaurant had tears in her eyes as she showed Lily where her family recipes would be taught in cooking classes. Mr. Patel proudly pointed out the small business mentoring office, where he would share decades of entrepreneurial wisdom. You've given them more than a building, Richard Way observed, joining his daughter as she watched these interactions. You've given them a future that includes their past. We did it together, Lily corrected, hugging her father. All of us. Richard nodded, his eyes twinkling. Speaking of together, that's quite a ring my favorite student gave you. When were you planning to tell your old father about this development? How did you know Jackson was your student? Lily asked, surprised. I never mentioned his name when I told you about his time in your class. Some teachers never forget certain students, Richard replied with a smile. Jackson was a quiet boy with extraordinary potential and sad eyes. I always wondered what became of him. He glanced across the room where Jackson was speaking with the mayor. Now I know. He became worthy of my daughter. The simple approval meant everything to Lily. Her father had sacrificed so much for her and Michael over the years. His blessing of this unexpected match completed her happiness. As the afternoon progressed into evening, the formal ceremony transitioned into a community celebration. Local musicians performed, children explored the new playgrounds, and residents from throughout the district shared food from their cultural traditions. Near sunset, Lily found herself momentarily alone on the rooftop garden, taking a quiet moment to absorb everything that had happened. The city spread out before her, not just buildings and streets, but living communities with stories and connections that deserved protection. There you are, Jackson said, joining her at the railing. My mother is already discussing wedding venues with your father. I believe they've narrowed it down to either the botanical gardens or the historic courthouse. Lily laughed. They're getting along surprisingly well for two people who only met a year ago. They share a common interest, Jackson pointed out, slipping his arm around her waist. Both want the best for their children, just expressed in different ways. They stood in comfortable silence watching the sunset paint the city skyline in golden hues. So much had changed since that rainy night when Lily had entered Alexander Chen's house, terrified and desperate. The journey from that moment to this one had been neither straightforward nor easy, but every challenge had led them here, to a partnership neither could have imagined but both now cherished. I have something for you, Jackson said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. A small engagement gift. He handed her an envelope containing a deed. Lily's eyes widened as she recognized the address, her father's. apartment building, which they had been renting for decades. "You bought our building?" she asked, confused. "The foundation did," Jackson clarified, "as part of the affordable housing initiative. Your father now owns his apartment, as do the other long-term residents. The building is being placed in a community land trust to ensure it remains affordable for future generations." Tears filled Lily's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "This means more than any diamond," she whispered. "Securing my father's home, his community." "It seemed appropriate," Jackson said simply, "since this journey began with your sacrifice for him. Now neither of you will ever have to worry about losing your home again." As dusk settled over the city and lights began twinkling on across the skyline, Lily thought about the extraordinary path that had brought them to this moment. From teacher to corporate executive, from desperate daughter to foundation leader, from a woman willing to sell herself to save her father to a woman now helping save entire communities. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked, watching the play of emotions across her face. "That life takes unexpected turns," Lily replied. "That sometimes what seems like the worst night of your life can lead to the best years of your life." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "When you showed up at Alexander's house that night, I thought I was rescuing you. I never imagined you would end up rescuing me from a life of corporate success without genuine purpose." "We rescued each other," Lily corrected gently, "and now we get to build something meaningful together, both personally and for the communities we serve." Below them, the celebration continued as residents embraced the education center as their own. Elizabeth Lee and Richard Way had emerged onto the rooftop garden, deep in conversation about wedding plans. Michael was showing a group of teenagers the music studio where they could learn recording skills. The historic district pulsed with life and possibility. "Ready to rejoin the party?" Jackson asked, offering his hand. Lily looked at the man beside her, no longer the intimidating ice emperor but her partner in all things, and at the ring that symbolized their shared future. Then she glanced at the vibrant community celebration below, evidence of what was possible when development centered on people, rather than just profit. "I'm ready," she said, taking his hand firmly in hers. As they descended to rejoin their families and the community they had helped preserve, Lily reflected on how completely her life had transformed since that desperate night 18 months ago. What had begun as a forced arrangement born of necessity had evolved into the most meaningful choice of her life. A choice to build connection rather than walls, to value community over status, to embrace love that transcended different worlds. Behind them, the education center stood as a tangible symbol of their shared vision, a building that honored the past while creating opportunity for the future. Before them stretched a life together, continuing the work they had begun in the historic district, but extending it to new communities, new challenges. And within them both lived the certainty that true worth wasn't measured in dollars or status, but in the lives touched, the communities preserved, and the love shared along the way. What had started as Lily's promised night, a transaction born of desperation, had become an enduring promise of partnership that would shape not just their lives but countless others. As they rejoined the celebration, surrounded by family, friends, and community members, Jackson and Lily embodied the very essence of what they had worked to create, a perfect balance of honoring roots while building toward a future rich with possibility. Their story, like the historic district itself, proved that the most meaningful developments aren't those that replace what came before, but those that build thoughtfully upon existing foundations, creating something new that respects the journey it took to arrive there. "To new beginnings," Jackson whispered, raising his glass in a private toast. "And to the paths that lead us to them," Lily added, "even when they begin in unexpected places." Their glasses clinked as the community celebration continued around them, a fitting soundtrack to the start of their shared journey, and the many new beginnings still to come. The end.